Saturday morning, everybody. Good morning. Saturday, November the 16th. Start into Thanksgiving week 2024. Good old 710 KNUS. Thanks for being here. The weather 52, 53 today, 28 tonight, 50 Sunday, and Monday 55 degrees. Thanksgiving is going to be 55 degrees. So, good morning, 303-696-1971. I think we have a very good show. This first hour will be open lines. And then I have never spoken to this man. I've read a number of his books. His name is Pete Earley, and he's done a book entitled Human Contact. And I read his books on his son. I read his book Hot House, and he worked in Leavenworth, worked inside the penitentiary, and wrote about that. He also wrote a book about WITSEC, where people go into witness protection. But one of the, I'm sure, most difficult books, and I'll ask him about the follow-up, is when his son slips into madness. And the book is entitled Crazy. And now he's got no human contact. And it's really interesting how we end up in what's the prison that's in Florence, and who's there and why. And he talks about how these people end up there. And this really begins in the childhoods of Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain. And they're in Marion Penitentiary, Marion, Illinois, and they murder two corrections officers on the same day. And the Bureau of Prisons condemns both men to the severest punishment that could be legally imposed, and then one created for them, unofficially called no human contact. And the prisoners are completely sealed off from the outside world with only their minds to occupy them. And it ends up in what we call Florence, Supermax. And it is a brutal, brutal book. And what life is like inside the penitentiaries. And just it goes on. And no one is better than Pete Earley when he does things like that. So he's with us at 10. Also, we're going to talk with the guys from, actually, the Toy Run now is coming. Once a year, motorcyclists ride and bring toys to Children's Hospital. And then this week, the imaginary Thanksgiving parade will go Wednesday. I will get an opportunity to come back and continue the tradition of the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade. And after these elections and after everything that's happened, I can't imagine what the parade will be like. So we begin with open lines, 303-696-1971. I think the culture story this morning is Tyson-Jake Paul fight. And the big losers, Netflix, after everything that they wanted to attain, then Netflix they hyped it, and then they delayed it, and it's the Tyson-Jake Paul fight. But did you see it? Where you, like myself and my family, you went for it. Now, there was a women's fight that was just prior to the Jake Paul fight, and that was a great fight. And then there was a fight before that, and that was a great fight. The opening fight was but the two middle fights were just incredible. And then comes the fight that everybody has been waiting for, because of the hype was well done, was Tyson and Paul. What's the lesson? What's the lesson? I'm as a boxing fan, as a fighting fan. There was that moment when you thought no one could beat Mike Tyson. When he was with Customato and they come down out of the Catskills, nobody is going to take that kid. Last night, would you watch Lennox Lewis and everybody that was sitting there? Some of it was great. I don't know how Rosie Perez ends up as the color person in that whole setup, but regardless, and they had all these different people and sound systems and stuff, and boy, it was awful. It was just terrible. And thankfully, my daughter is a pretty good technocrat. So when a fight totally drops, she on her phone is able to transfer me the fight because I so wanted to see it. And in the end was Jake Paul. And he's an interesting in and of himself. He's a good fighter. And now he wants to fight Canelo. I'm going each and every time, man. Canelo, That's a big leap. But he said he wants to fight Canelo next. And I don't know if that'll be a gate or not, but boy, last night, I don't know how many people got that fight, 75 million, 80 million people. And maybe that's what killed it. And it was horrible. In the end, and I never thought I'd say I feel sorry for Mike Tyson, but I did. I was talking to Brother Jeff. We were texting last night. It got to the third round, and Brother Jeff said he couldn't watch it. And talking to a lot of people about it. And I said, no, going into the fight, was it a work or was it a shoot? I think Jake Paul could have hurt him, and he didn't, and he chose not to. And you could see it in Mike's legs. You know, he's got that thing going on now where his upper body is bigger, and he always had those tree stumps for legs. And, you know, I'm just when Tyson fought in that era before the Kings got their hands on him and Cuss was alive, he was just amazing. And we're going to talk about the childhood of these two brutal characters when we have Pete Earley on. Mike Tyson had a brutal childhood, brutal childhood. So there's that if you want to talk about it. And then this, and I do want to talk about RFK Jr. Maybe that's a topic as well, because I think it ties. Malcom X's daughters sued the CIA, the FBI, and the NYPD over the assassination of Malcolm. And I'm looking at this RFK Jr. And so he's 9 years old when his uncle, President Kennedy, gets assassinated in 1963. Then 14 when his father was assassinated while he's running for president in 1968. And Kennedy learned of his father's shooting. He's at Georgetown Prep. And a few hours later, he flew to LA on Hubert Humphrey's plane, along with his older sister, Kathleen, and Joseph. And then his father had died. And Kennedy was the pallbearer at his own father's funeral. And he spoke and he read excerpts from his father's speeches at the Mass commemorating his death at Arlington. What do you think he harbors? Seriously. Now, I'm going to bring up Malcom X's daughters as well. What do you think? And do you think here's a better question. It's one I was booting in my head. Do you think there's a connection between Malcom X's murder, the murder of Jack Kennedy, the murder of Bobby Kennedy, and I'll really curveball it, and the murder of Martin Luther King? Do you think there's any connects? So one of the things that Donald Trump has made a promise, I'm going to show you. We're going to go in and we're going to take a look and we're going to show you what they got. So, yeah, sure.
Hey, real quick, Pete, I had a couple of calls. I just wanted to clarify something on the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade.
Yes.
That's actually going to be a week from this Wednesday. That is November 27th. We said it was this upcoming Wednesday.
I apologize.
You're not, everybody that's called in, you're not crazy. No. Thanksgiving is a week from Wednesday. So thanks for the calls.
Thank you. Because I cleared that up with Kelly the other day. So it's my fault. So it's a week from this Wednesday. There you go. All right. Let's get these phone calls underway. Stephen, hey, man, you're on a radio show. It's a Saturday morning, and thank you.
Hey, I'm appalled at the overall treatment of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And before I get into that, did you see him working out the other day doing pull-ups?
Yeah, he's stout. I mean, he's kind of put together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when that family gave up so much, and they don't even give him cover until after Trump was attempted assassination in July. They don't let him primary. And he comes out and says Donald Trump was a gift from God to him, so he can do his agenda on the food. I think it's outrageous that anybody would be against that. The Democrats started the whole.
Would you ever read the history of his life story, his history? I mean, there's moments that. Remember, he gets clipped for heroin possession. He's got a problem with heroin, and then he's got a problem with multiple drugs. But, you're asking yourself, and I'm an addict and an alcoholic myself, but he's in this pressure cooker of a family. And it's like talking about Tyson, and his favorite uncle is murdered, and then following up, his father's murdered. And that, I don't care who you are. I'm not making apologies for him. I'm just simply saying, and then his own family kind of turns on him too.
Yeah, it's amazing. My wife and I, all the years of, and she voted for Obama twice, and she shifted over, and we don't let anyone know, and we still don't, because they're ugly. People are ugly about it.
Oh, well, he is the rogue Kennedy. And having said that, but, he's got this history of problems with the church, and he had to buy his divorce. And I believe that she was a suicide, and he just, he's in this family that was at least viewed as the perfect big family, which was anything but.
Right.
He is, he's the odd, wild, but at the same time, I was reading, I always begin these prefaces with I was reading. So when Liggett and Myers, and I was talking to a friend about this last night, when Liggett and Myers and Philip Morris and all those big tobacco companies, when they finally, I think it's in 1963, when the Surgeon General says, that this is going to kill you, it's detrimental, they started buying into big food. And we have big pharma, but we have big food. And one of the charges that he makes is that at least I'm a believer, and I've read that different kinds of cigarettes were made so you will get addicted to that brand and won't stray. I mean, my dad smoked Lucky Strikes, and could there be anything worse except maybe Camels? But I ended up smoking menthols, and once you start smoking menthol cigarettes, you don't smoke, non-menthols, and so they got that same ideology according to what I've read. And they applied it to food. It's called big food. And that's, again, one of the things that he goes after is food.
Well, for him to want to do that is extremely righteous.
Oh.
I mean, and he might get shot over it.
I would say, everything that you say is true, but
I'm really disgusted with the far left media and the people against what he wants to do, because it's true, man. I mean, I'm 74 years old, and the food is way different when I was a kid, and the crap these kids get, and it's and the crap I eat is,
well, and also remember, he's an open critic of the United States relationship with Saudi Arabia. And he has talked about the Saud's role in 9/11. Now, one of the promises, again, that Donald J. makes is, I will tell you who knocked down those buildings. You want to believe it.
And who shot his uncle?
Shot his father.
Yeah.
Do you think is there a tie there?
I don't know about that, but I sure don't. I've listened to all your programs, and I've watched TV things, and I'm just absolutely a fervent believer that our government is part of that.
Well, we certainly know now that, taking of all things, the Warren Commission was simply a cover-up.
Yeah,
that's all
it was.
That's all it was. And Lyndon Johnson was saying, I just want this to put the American people's mind at ease that this one lone gunman did the job. Stephen, I don't buy that for a
With
second.
a crappy rifle that he didn't have to buy, he could have bought it on any street corner.
That's right.
A better rifle.
Much better.
Just
Much better.
ridiculous.
So what do you?
But,
And now I was really thrilled. Because I'm a Malcom X fan, and Malcolm's daughters are now suing. Guess who? The CIA, the FBI. It doesn't mean that they're going to win, but the daughters are now suing over Malcolm's assassination. And so I'm reading this last night, and I'm thinking, is there a bounce between Malcolm's death, the Kennedys, and Dr. King?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to what I thought the world was in 1966 and what I start to know now, the saying, I was right. Everything I know is wrong. It's
the world up to what did they call it? The world turned upside down. There's a song. And everything that I certainly believed is just simply not true.
Yeah. The American people, the American working man is wonderful, men and women, but the government is just, it's pathetic. And some people, I have this view that Donald Trump really isn't a Republican. He's just Donald Trump. And both of those parties have had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and they've done nothing on the border, ever. Nothing serious. And I'm pretty much a one-issue guy. So I overlook all of the foibles of Donald Trump and just shut that damn border down. Man.
He's got 100 days. Historians talk about the first 100 days. And I must have had this conversation 80 times. If the promises that he makes, the wars will end and the border will shut down and they will drill and the price of oil will drop and all those, because the price of oil is one of the prime movers in inflation. All these things are going to happen. Well, if they do, great, but you got 100 days. And
well, he doesn't have the Republican establishment that's going to work against him this time, I think. I don't think, like the last time, that guy from Wisconsin, they just threw a bunch of monkey wrenches into it. And
well, that's what I finally finished that book 1960 about Jack Kennedy and Richard Nixon, and the behind the scenes were Joe Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson and all these Democratic power brokers. They don't want Jack Kennedy talking anything at all about civil rights. They don't want him. In fact, when the inaugural ball that was put together by Frank Sinatra for Jack Kennedy, Joe Kennedy, the ambassador, calls and says, keep Sammy Davis Jr. away from all of this because he had married the Swedish woman, this white woman. And Joe Kennedy, so they're no civil rights saviors. They're political. No. They're political realists.
Well, they blocked Dwight Eisenhower's attempt at the civil rights legislation.
But then he used the 82nd Airborne into Little Rock, and he straightened that up pretty quick. But it's just I'm just.
Pete, I got to tell you this before I've been on too long, and I get
sure. I know. I like your call.
The reason I like Donald Trump is the same reason I've liked you over the years. I've listened to you since the 80s. You tear after the Republicans and the Democrats, and each side hates you, and you got to be doing something right if each side hates you. And each side hates Trump.
No, I had, if I said it, everybody would know, at lunch with a really significant guy, and they were going to do these seminars on the Ramseys and on Allen's murder, and nobody wanted me there. I thought, he said, they just didn't want that. No, I thought it was great. I thought, I like, Nietzsche's great line. Don't tell me who likes you. It means nothing. Tell me who doesn't like you, and then I will know who you are. Isn't that great?
Well, Allenberg deserves a damn memorial. I mean, this is a blue state, a blue city. How could they ignore him?
Well, the movie is now out, The Order, and I haven't seen it, but I've read all the reviews, and I'll let it go unsaid, but it's not
They
close.
should have had you as an advisor.
Well, they had Kevin Flynn, but as soon as and Kevin Flynn is an encyclopedia of this, and he wrote the book, he and Gary. But as soon as they buy your book, it's theirs now. And this FBI agent that's allegedly tracing or going after Bob Matthews, the guy doesn't exist. He now they're claiming, oh, he's an amalgam of all these different FBI agents. That's not how they caught. It's not how they caught this guy. But they used this guy Jude Law, who I know the name, and they make him into this FBI agent who is chasing Robert Matthews, the ringleader. Well, that guy didn't even exist. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
Here we go again. We'll do it again. But it's I don't know. Somebody said you want to come and see it. I missed the opening. I had some family stuff, but I don't know. I don't even know if I want to go see it now. Truly.
Yeah. You'll leave being disgusted, I would
We'll
guess.
see. Take care of yourself, man. Great first call. Thank you. We good to go? We're good. All right, break. The man said break. We have a line open. Pete Earley will be with us at 10. I mean, what a book. It was entitled No Human Contact. Solitary confinement, maximum security, and 2 inmates that changed the system. And I'm a big Pete Earley fan. I'm going to ask him about his son, ask him about a number of different things. I've read I think 3 or 4 of his books. The Imaginary Thanksgiving Parade is a week from this Wednesday. There you go, Peter. We'll talk about the toy run. We'll talk about Malcolm's daughter suing the CIA, and one and only RFK Jr. And he's an adventure. So you ready to go? Let's do this thing. 303-6. Now lines are full. 303-696-1971. Talk to you about my friends at Waterpro.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Butchery Restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
Full lines and good morning, everyone. It's a Saturday, 7:10 KNUS. Peter Boyles, 52 will be the high. Got my motorcycle outside. Shows you how smart I'm not, but I'm going to go ride. I'm happy today to talk about you and all with our friends in Water Pros. And boy, there's a holiday gift for everybody. Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. You can remove forever chemicals and microplastics and hard water, and the Water Pros. It's the Peter Boyles special. So and the price is right, $3,000, it's $3,195, but it will make such a huge difference. You get a whole water softener, you get a point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system fully installed. But start the process, go to waterpros.net. And this is a perfect thing to do, especially right now. A lot of family headed to your unit. You get the free in-home consultation. They come to your house, they test the water, they answer all of your questions, all the concerns you have, and they show you. Trust these guys. I will, and you will, and the Water Pros, family-owned and veteran-owned business, dedicated to providing you the best in water treatment for less than the other guys. These guys are terrific. Waterpros.net today. Request your free water test or call 303-862-5554. It's 303-862-5554 and ask for the Peter Boyles special. All right, back to the phones we go. Robert on line 2, you waited. Good morning and thank you.
Good morning, brother man.
Hey, man.
Just wanted to throw out a couple of, you talked about Trump's first 100 days and kind of the standard by which most presidents are judged, of what they can accomplish in that. And let me preface this with, these are just my opinions, and I have no one to credit or no one to blame if they're stupid. So with regard to oil production, what would you think about the idea of the Trump administration saying to the oil producers, hey, you know what, we'll give you either heavily discounted or free leases for, let's say, the next year or the next 2 years, or a reduction in the tax that you're going to pay on the production and whatnot and the regulatory costs if you solely pump that oil back into American refineries to bring the price of fuel down for American consumers. And I understand that oil is a global commodity and whatnot, but to hell with the rest of the world. And then my other thought on that is, with regard, not on that specifically, but with regard to the war in Ukraine, there's no way you get Russia out of Ukraine. I hate to say it, but
True.
They're not going. They're just not. So if we accept that as a given, what is the next best solution? And to my mind, that would be a negotiated peace.
Don't you think that since a week ago or 2 weeks ago, how many phone calls do you think Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have had?
Honest guess, I don't, or honest answer, I don't know. But I would imagine it's probably 3, 4 at least
minimum. Who is president of the United States of America as we speak? Donald Trump.
On paper,
Yes,
Joe Biden.
but
who's actually running things? It ain't him.
Well, but Biden, like I said, Donald Trump, I believe right now is the government in exile. How many times do you think he and Netanyahu have spoken on the phone?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if that number was in the dozens.
Indeed. The same
whether
thing.
Directly or, with their staffs and whatnot.
And
the Israel-Gaza conflict is a very different one than the Ukraine-Russia conflict, for a grand variety of reasons. My guess, I think Donald Trump is going to tell Netanyahu, if he hasn't already, we're not going to put any restrictions on you. We might not take direct action on your behalf, but we'll share intelligence and we'll sell you whatever you want to buy to end this war.
And I'm not sure that that's what they're doing. With the United States of America under the Biden administration is now in a surrogate war with Russia. We're the principal funder, we're the weapons sellers to the Ukraine. There's nothing more stupid than to do that, to go against this guy. Now, remember when that story came out and everybody guffawed about Trump's giving the COVID test to Putin and there were poor Americans
Mm-hmm.
that couldn't get a COVID test. That's nonsense. But it shows
Oh,
you
yeah.
as a backdoor. And it's like, you know, neither a defense of Trump nor a defense of Putin, but it really is how it works. And so Donald Trump has made this campaign promise of, I'll end that war. Well, and I was telling somebody that was Eisenhower's promise about Korea. I'll end it. And was one of the reasons Ike was elected, because he said, I'll go to Korea and I'll end this. Now, whether Trump can do it or not is a separate issue. But, you know, you got these two major wars, and we are the surrogates for the Israelis and we're the surrogates for the Ukrainians.
Absolutely.
That's the truth.
And I guess that we've proceeded under this premise for the couple of years now of it is possible for Ukraine to win this war, and win being defined as drive Russia completely out of Ukraine. And it's a false premise.
Yes.
It's absolutely a false premise.
Yes.
They've already got a foothold in the Donbass. They own the Crimea.
Right.
You know, they own the Black Sea ports. You're never going to get them out of there. I mean, not without a global war, which I'd love to say nobody wants, but I think there's a certain segment that does.
Oh, I agree.
You know, so again, if we say that premise of driving Russia out in its entirety is a false one on its face, there's no substitute for a win, you know, for total victory. But sometimes you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And right now, the good is, how do we stop people from dying? And the only way, in my opinion, to do that is a negotiated peace where Russia maybe pulls back a little bit. I mean, they're still going to hold the Donbass, they're still going to hold the Black Sea, but people are not getting massacred, because Ukraine is, and it's really this simple. Ukraine, sooner or later, no matter how much money and weapon we give them, they're going to run out of people.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's attrition. At the same time, you know, Putin's in that situation like Nixon in Vietnam. It's like you're going to have to do something. Nixon did everything wrong and then told lies about it. But if Donald Trump can be the intermediary that he says he can be and will do, and ends the war and finds a way to, I don't know about the insanity in Gaza. I don't even know where to begin. But if he can have some impact there, then he's, you know, and the oil, because you I'm sure know better than I do, but the price of petroleum is one of the major pushes of inflation. The price of gasoline is everything. And
absolutely, and even more so diesel fuel, because the fact of the matter is, every store that has clothes or groceries or anything else
needs gas.
Only has clothes or groceries or anything else because somebody in a truck brings it there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that truck runs on diesel.
That's right. That's right. And so if he can do that, if he can, like he claims, drill, baby, drill, if that begins, I mean, there's so many variables in the model. But as I mentioned last week, I filled up a Harley Davidson. It was $20. Come on.
Oh, I hear you. Brother, a friend of mine and I went out to Minnesota earlier this year for a charity ride. And we did the same ride. You know, we've done it every year for the last 5 years. And every year I have watched that cost of filling up our bikes on the way out there increase, you know, and it's probably 3 times as expensive overall now as it was 5 years ago.
Yes. I mean, we used to fill bikes up for $5. Now, you know, but, yeah, but I mean, I filled it up yesterday too, because I'm going to go, it was 30 degrees when I left my house this morning, but I'm going to ride today, by God. But I bought gas yesterday. I got highway pegs put on my bike, so I want to go out and ride on them. But you're pumping gas, and and I think I had a quarter tank, and it was $20. You know,
you're throwing that 91 octane.
There you go.
And
there
boy,
you go. Yep. Yeah, no, you got to get the 91. You know, and that's if, and there's a big if, ... If Donald Trump can do what he says he wants to do or can do. And he's got the House, he's got the Senate. He's going to have more of the court than he's ever had before if they get Sotomayor. And, he's got the perfect storm. Now what?
No, I agree with that. And I think that was one of the reasons that I brought up the idea of discounting the taxes and fees with regard to oil exploration, and production, is that will be the biggest and fastest way to, quote unquote, put money back in the American consumer's pocket.
Agreed.
Like, look, man, when I go and fill up my truck, I drive a Ram 2500. I'm a contractor.
Sure.
I
Great
work for a living. I pull trailers.
Yep.
It costs me $80 to fill this tank every single time. If it costs me $50 instead of $80 when I'm filling up twice a week with all the driving I do, that's a lot of money when you factor it in over the course of a month.
Robert, what do you think it costs to tank up a Peterbilt or what do you think? What do you think it costs?
One of my bros is an over the road driver, man. He says he's putting in between $300 and $400 every time he fills up.
See,
and because of all of the regulatory fees for trip tickets and stuff like that, he's got to charge between $3.50 and $4 a mile just to make any profit whatsoever.
Man.
And then you have illegal aliens that are willing to drive for $1.50 a mile because they're stacking two in a cab and they don't care about insurance or anything else. That are cutting them right out.
I agree. Peter.
That's a whole other thing.
No, Peter built Peter built a truck for a man to drive. Wow. You're a fine call, man. 2 in a row. Thank you. Good shape. Keep going. What are we doing? All right. Good morning, everybody. Coming up, Pete Earley, and this is the fourth of his books I've read. No Human Contact. It's going to be one of those days. 52. Sun comes out. Get on to see the Devil's Head Boys. 28, and then tomorrow 50, and Monday 55 degrees. Back to the phones we go. Hey, Michael, you're on the show, and good morning.
Hey, Peter, thank you for taking my call. I'll be brief here, but I was just watching this. I thought it's important to point out, as someone like myself, because I consider myself to kind of be a moderate, more or less, kind of look at things from a centrist point of view. But regarding RFK Jr., it was really interesting. Obviously he's all about talking about eliminating the obesity problems, getting rid of the ultra processed foods, industrially formulated products, which are high in fats, starches, sugars, and additives, just certain things he wants to kind of, make better for the culture, I guess. But it's really interesting. I was thinking about this when the Obama administration had this whole plan to, improve school lunches, cut down on, high sugary foods, fattening foods. A lot of the Republican, conservative media was just up in arms, and they're invading our rights, they're taking this away. But now when it's RFK Jr. doing this, I don't see so much outrage on the right. In fact, I've seen multiple conservative personalities, Hannity, Laura Ingraham, just to name a few, saying, oh, this is great, this is going to be transparent, this is going to make America healthy again. Well, where was the outrage under the Obama administration from then when they were trying to do this?
First of all, great call. A lot of it is we know more. And the other part of it is Republicans hate Democrats. Democrats hate Republicans. If somebody said it's daylight outside, they go check. So, but we know so much more. I mean, when I'm a kid, and again, I'm much older than you, they used to have doctors with cigarettes in their mouths selling cigarettes on the back of them. My grandma got the Saturday Evening Post, and there'd be a doctor or some guy dressed as a doctor, white lab coat, one of those mirror things on his head, and have a cigarette. I mean, we know more and catching up. And he's a lightning rod. Believe me when I tell you, the guy is no cherry. He's been in and out of jams, in and out of troubles. He was addicted. He's been through problems with heroin. He supported Ocasio-Cortez in the new Green Deal solutions. He's just a number of different things. But it is the question, I think, is he the right guy? Now, your point's well taken. about, what was then, but it's all changing. It's changing as fast as fast can be. So, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be the fly in the ointment, or he's really going to bring something forward. But you'll know him in 100 days too. Whether or not Trump tolerates him or he tolerates Trump. The same thing's true with Musk. I think Musk might be the smartest guy in this country, truly.
Well, I think he has a lot of good ideas, but when he says he wants to cut 1/3 of the national, budget, that's trillions of dollars.
There you are.
Okay. They're so worried about reducing the debt. This is a campaign promise they made. They're not going to get the debt under $20 trillion in national debt. I think what they need to focus on is the debt not increasing. But the estimates that they've thrown out there, I feel like in a lot of ways are unrealistic to reduce it by as much as they want. And all of the things they would have to cut is just astronomical, unrealistic.
And it's slow and slow. You ever watch when a public utility asks for an increase? This is one of the things I've always thought was fascinating. And a certain big company would say, we need $1. I'm just hypothetical number. We need $1 increase. And then the utility board says, no, but we'll give you 50 cents. And then 6 months later, they're back and they say, we need $1 increase. And the utility board says, we'll give you 50 cents. Now they got their $1. And, and that's how you watch these characters. And like I said, I think he's such a unique, and I'm not saying unique good or unique bad, but just unique. And he, after his father was murdered, he augured into drug abuse. He was arrested in Massachusetts. He got expelled from private schools. But I've been waiting for a guy now. There's part of me that says keep this guy away from anything, and there's part of me that says let him go in there and let him see if he can really flush out some questions that I've had since I was a very young man. And he just might be the right guy because he is angry. He understands the government to a degree. And apparently Trump's given him a free rein. Let's see what kind of chaos he can bring.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. And then I'll hop off and let some other callers get on. But Jared Polis, he posted on Twitter about, some categories, there are entire departments like the nutrition department at the FDA that have to go. Yeah. They're not doing their job. They're not protecting our kids. No. And for Jared Polis to come out basically a full-throated support of RFK Jr. is pretty amazing, I think. And it shows that he wants the best for, I guess the health of our young people in this country, the state as well. But I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing to see him do that.
Well, and again, there's a lot of people that believe that Jared Polis is jockeying for a run at the White House because he's term limited here. So I'm telling you, it happens, Michael, on levels. It doesn't happen just to, the one dimension that you and I see. These people are schemers and they're planners and they're thinking miles ahead of us. And so, or miles behind us. But it ain't what it appears. I love your calls. Thanks, son. Have a good day. You. All right, man. David Ellis, Cherry Creek. Heard me. And boy, here comes the holidays now. Music's on and Thanksgiving's rolling up. And get ready for the holidays. David Ellis Jewelers. Get a fortune in cash. Secure an appraisal from David for all the valuables that you have tucked away in your home. And what's still true, and let me share the other reason to see David, just in case you don't have a Rolex, rare coins, or a silver tea set, see David Ellis for all your most meaningful gift-giving occasions. David Ellis Jewelers is just the right item, just the right price for special people that means the most. Antique watches, emerald pendants, gold necklaces, diamond rings, trusted jeweler. David's our guy, my guy. He's been a good friend, buying precious metals and antiques in Colorado for decades. Dazzling cases filled with hundreds of new and used pieces your loved ones will indeed treasure. Holiday gift-giving time is now. Visit David Ellis Jewelers. See for yourself. Look for the black awning on the corner, 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek. Explore davidellisjewelry.com or call my friend David. You can make the call at 303-322-8779. Again, on the corner of 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek, David Ellis Jewelers, 303-322-8779, and tell them Peter Boyles sent you.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Butchery Restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
Morning, everybody. Saturday, 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station. We have Jam Lines. I'm Peter Boyles. Coming up, Pete Earley. Then we'll talk about the toy run and imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade is a Thursday away from us. And we'll do it again in open lines. We go to Tom on line one. Tom, you're on the show. Thank you and good morning. Tom. Tom. All right, let's go to Mike. Mike, you're on the show. Good morning. What's going on here? Hey, Mike. Earth to Mike, Mike to Peter. Brother Man. Let me try. Okay, I'll go down one more. Is there a third name down there? Oh, all right, let's try Mike again. Hey, Mike, can you hear us? I can hear there's like okay. Adam's talking to guy on line 303-696-1971. See if you can make it work. Mike. Remember the camel coming in, or Mike. Well, okay. This is all right, Peter. Coming up, and this book is just an amazing book on prison systems and these murderous gangs and what happens. And Pete Earley has written just fine books. I see another number bumping. All right, let's try again, see if we can make it work. Mike, you're on the show.
Yeah.
There.
Sorry.
There he goes. Hey, man, good morning.
Plus, Earth to Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lost contact there trying to get off the speakerphone.
Go ahead.
I understand you don't like. But no, I just want to say about RFK Jr. I didn't really know this guy. I didn't know I just knew the obvious things, but I didn't know he had such an interesting background.
I can't, for some reason, I can't understand you. You said you didn't know what about him again?
How old he was when his father was killed.
Yeah, he was 14.
9 years old.
Well, it was when Jack, his uncle, was killed. And this is, I went back and read all this.
Okay.
So he's here, he's in his, he's in his dad's RFK, I mean, it's just, but he grows up in DC, and they also have the homes in Massachusetts and Hyannis and all that. But he's the son of, this story, but he was more the age of awareness when his favorite uncle gets murdered, and then it gets worse when his father gets murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So he's more than aware.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really interested. I don't know his thoughts about vaccines. As someone said on TV that he claims vaccines used to have mercury in them, or have mercury in them, and they haven't since the early 2000s, I guess. But there's other things. There may be other things there. I mean, preservatives, things called adjutants, pieces of metal or glass, even.
Yeah,
from what I've read.
He said some odd things, though.
That bear story. They played that bear story. You know what I thought of? I thought of those idiots that faked hitting a dead bear when they took a photo.
Yeah. but he, remember that's, I mean, he said that, what was one of the things I think I read that he said that the vaccine for COVID, and if I say this and it's wrong, I'm going to feel stupid, but it was there to protect Jews and he, he says, but also he goes after Anthony Fauci, he goes after Bill Gates, he goes after Joe Biden. He wrote that book, The Real Anthony Fauci. I've seen it in the shelves. I have never read it, but he's just, but I don't know if you need a guy like that or you don't need a guy like that.
Well, yeah. It's like, why is he putting out Gates or Getz, whatever his name is?
Gates is their enemy, man. I mean, he's one of the enemies to the system that is anti-vax. They think one of Bill Gates's projects was to get the entire world or the United States of America vaxxed. And so that makes him, puts him on the,
referring to Joe, or the 70 or the 7-year-old child.
Yeah. And, Fauci quit, or Fauci's retired, or whatever it is, he's gone. But if you read the guy's life, he's 9 when his uncle Jack gets murdered, and that's in 1963. He's 14 when his father. Now, let me ask you just a loaded question that I brought in this morning. So you got Malcom X's daughters, and this is sort of an under the radar story right now. Malcolm's daughters are suing the CIA, the FBI, and the NYPD. Do you think there's any connection between RFK Jr.'s assassination, Uncle Jack's assassination, and Malcom X's assassination? Do you think there's any connects?
Oh, they're just, what are they suing for? Information, disclosure?
I think it's fascinating. I think to see.
Yeah, I don't doubt there's connections here.
Yeah. See,
that must have been crazy times. I was so small, I didn't know what was going on.
Let me do this. I got to pull the pin. Good call. Thank you, sir. Hold on. Now, I've never met Pete Earley. I think this is his 4th book that I've read, and he's absolutely brilliant, and he's very honest about what he does. But this is about, why do we have Supermax? And where do these characters come from? And they're brutal. That's entitled No Human Contact, but it is, Pete Earley is the man. I've never spoken to him. I'm really excited to do this. Then we'll talk at noon about the toy run coming up. And a week from Wednesday is the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade. There, I said it right. 52 will be the high, 50 Sunday, Monday, 55 degrees. Everybody ready? Doink, doink, back with Pete Earley. Stay here.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Butchery Restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
special hour straight ahead and hopefully more. Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, November 16th, 2024. I'm Peter Boyles, Radio Free Denver, good old 710 KNUS on a Saturday. Weather goes like this: 52 the high, 28 tonight, 50 on Sunday, and 55 on Monday. This is indeed a real treat for me. I have been a fan of this man for the longest time. I've read Hot House, I read Witsec, I read Crazy, and I just finished No Human Contact. The one, the only Pete Earley. Mr. Earley, it's a real honor to have you on the show, and good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on, Mr. Boyles.
It's Peter.
Can I call you Peter if you call me Peter?
You got yourself a deal.
Great.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I was go to the gym early on Saturday mornings. When was the first time? I think it was Hot House. Was the first of the. First of all, would you do a background? I should have done that. I'm jumping in like I know everything.
Oh, that's okay.
Do a bio, please.
Well, interestingly enough, I grew up in Colorado. I grew up in a small town that probably many of your listeners have never heard of, called Fowler, Colorado.
Oh, sure.
You go down to Pueblo and you head east. You hit Fowler and then Manzanola and Rocky Ford and La Junta. And I went to high school there and grew up in Colorado. So I have a strong, love for Colorado, and I miss those mountains out here in the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
So,
But I worked, I started out, I went to school in Oklahoma. I ended up working for the Washington Post, was hired by Bob Woodward, the famed investigative reporter. I worked there for 6 years, and I had a chance to do my first book, which was Family of Spies, about the John Walker spy ring.
oh, man.
He recruited his best friend, his son, his brother, and they were the big spies of the 80s. Before that, people didn't think American spied. You put your hand across your heart and you were loyal. And after Walker was caught, we realized that wasn't the case. So that was my first book, and I was fortunate. It was a mini series on TV, and I thought, hey, this is easy. Well, it turned out it wasn't.
I'm rolling.
But my next book, book was The Hot House, and that one really changed my life. I was young or younger, and I convinced the Bureau of Prisons, a guy named, the director was Michael J. Quinlan. I went over to see him. I was always interested in prisons. What happens when you put all these sharks together in one pool? And I went over to see him, and he said, oh, you reporters, you show up when there's a riot. You show up when there's a tragedy, but you really don't understand prisons. And so I said, well, if you'll give me carte blanche, allow me as a reporter to enter your maximum security prison in Leavenworth, Kansas, and just roam around and talk to people, I'll spend a year there. And he said, are you serious? I said, yeah, I'm dead serious. So I went out in 87, and I would spend 23 days in the joint and then home for 23 days for my own sanity, and then go back. And that in 1987 is when I first met Thomas Silverstein, who's the major character in No Human Contact, and also is responsible for your federal prison in Florence, the ADX. So that's kind of it. I've done 22 books. You don't want to hear about them all. A couple only my mother read, but that's how it goes.
May I ask you about one other book in particular?
Sure.
The book about your son.
Yeah.
That one the book you titled it Crazy, and what a devastating, devastating. Yeah.
That refers to the mental health system in our country. And it really became, so what happened was, my son was a student at the Pratt University in Brooklyn. And we talked every Sunday. I live in Virginia. And on this particular day, Peter, he goes, Dad, food doesn't taste good. I've stopped eating. And I said, really? And then he hung up the phone. So I called him back, and he says, Dad, I don't know. I think I took 4 homeless people to breakfast this morning, but I'm not sure. Well, what'd you do? I don't want to talk about it. Hung up. And then I called him back. He said, Dad, I don't I'm having trouble distinguishing between what's real and what's a dream. Is this real or am I dreaming this? So obviously something was wrong. I raced to New York. My wife was able to find us a psychiatrist. And Peter, I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, if you're lucky, your son's using drugs. If he's not, he has a mental illness. And then he proceeded to tell us that blood tests showed my son wasn't on drugs, and proceeded to give us this just horrific description. He said, your son has bipolar disorder. He will always be on medication. These medications will make him gain weight. He'll probably develop diabetes. He'll probably never work. Marriage is not a good idea. And he probably will get arrested, and he could end up homeless or in jail. And by the way, people with mental illness die 15 to 20 years before the rest of us. Well, I was devastated, and I walked out of that room, and I looked at my son, Kevin, and he looked at me, and I said, why are you smiling, son? This is breaking my heart. And he goes, oh, Dad, ignore that guy. He's crazy.
Yeah.
So he had anyway, so what happened then was a year goes by. My son took meds for about 2 weeks. He got better. I didn't think anything of it. And then I got a frantic call, and it was my other son in New York. And he said, Dad, come quick. Kevin's crazy. And I raced to New York. He'd been wandering around the city for 5 days, barely slept, hadn't eaten, convinced that he was on a mission to save Natalie Portman, the actress. And I drove him, and during that 5-hour drive from New York to where I live in Virginia, he would laugh 1 minute and cry the next. And I said, please take that medication. He said, pills are poison, leave me alone. And right before we got to the emergency room, he said, how would you feel, Dad, if someone killed himself? Well, I took him into the emergency room, and the nurse rolled her eyes while he talked gibberish about Natalie Portman, and had this fixation with her. And then we were taking a room for 4 hours. We sat there all by ourselves because they didn't want him around anybody else. And finally he said, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm going to leave. I said, hang on. And I raced out. I literally grabbed a doctor. And when he came in the room, he said, look, Mr. Earley, I'm sorry, I can't help your son. Virginia law was very specific, and Colorado has similar laws. Unless the person at that point posed an imminent, immediate danger to himself or others, nobody could intervene, because my son had said pills were poison, and we'd been sitting there 4 hours. Obviously there was he wasn't a threat. So my son raced out of the hospital, and I was devastated. And the doctor said, look, bring him back after he hurts you or someone else. And so I took him home. 48 hours later, he was sitting there with tinfoil wrapped on his head, watching the TV. The CIA was stealing his thoughts. He slipped out of the house. He broke into a stranger's house. Luckily, they weren't there, because they were gun owners and probably would have shot him. He broke into the house to take a bubble bath. Took 5 officers to get him out. And they called me, and I went racing over there. And the officer was standing outside, a really great guy. And he said, even though your son has bipolar, even though he's told us he's off his med, even though he's obviously psychotic, even though we picked him up in a house taking a bubble bath, unless you tell the psychiatrist in there that he tried to kill you, he'll go to jail rather than getting any kind of help. So my son hadn't threatened to kill me, but I went in and I said, hey, my son threatened to kill me. I lied. And that was good enough to get him held over for 24 hours to get into a hospital. And he voluntarily committed himself. But then, and I'll wrap this up quickly, but then 24 hours after that, I got a call from his psychiatrist. He said, I'm sorry, your insurance company's not going to pay for this because they say it's been 24 hours. He's not dangerous. We have to let him go. They're not going to pay. So I called that insurance company, Peter, and I mentioned that I used to work at the Washington Post, and I mentioned that I was a good friend with Mike Wallace.
Yep.
And Wallace called that hospital, and my son was allowed to stay for 14 days.
Yeah. Yes.
And then I got the worst news. He was charged with 2 felonies, breaking and entering and destruction of property. And this is what really got me going to write crazy, because I discovered that he wasn't alone. 2 million people with mental illnesses are booked into jails every year. you know it in Denver. I mean, there are 365,000 people in our jails and prisons with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. And Denver has been a hot spot for people who are homeless. They're attracted to Denver, and you see them on your streets, and they go in and out and in and out of jail. And unfortunately, jails have become our new mental asylums, and that's wrong.
How is he now? Was one of my questions.
He's doing great. He's doing fantastic. And that's the upside of the story. I mean, we went through 5 years of hell.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, I don't want to take too much time explaining this,
No,
but
please.
another, okay. So the judge gave him 2 years at our request. We actually asked him to give him another year of probation. We had misdemeanors. And we asked him to do 2 years rather than one because we wanted to keep him on his meds. Because medication doesn't help everybody. It helped him. And so the 2 years go, he does great. He gets a job. He's doing fabulous. And then when that 2 years ended, he stopped taking his meds. Well, I could tell he was off his meds. And I thought, well, I'm the parent. I can handle this. So the first thing I did was I tried logic, and I divided a legal pad in half. And I said, oh, look, here's when you're doing well, and here's when you're not. Oh, it's when you're taking meds. Well, you can't argue logic with someone who's not thinking logically. So then I tried bribery. I said, I'll pay you $50 a week to take your meds in front of me. And my son, being very smart, said, well, I'm not a prostitute. And I went, okay, great. So then I tried duplicity, Peter. I ground up his medication. He was on a medication called Depakote.
He found that.
He
found it in his food, if I remember.
Yeah, I put it in his cereal. Thanks for reading the book.
Yeah.
And he came out, and I discovered the Depakote floated. And so he knew, and he was angry. And so then I said, you either have to, if you live with me, you have to take your meds. And he told me some rather words I can't use on the radio. And jumped out of my car, went to my ex-wife's house. Well, we have a mobile crisis response team, and I called them up and I said, hey, look, my son's off his meds. I need you to come and help us. And they said, wait a minute, is he dangerous? And I said, no, he's not dangerous. But last time, they said, whoa, you can't judge him on what happened last time. We have 1.5 million people in Fairfax County. We have one mobile crisis response team at the time. It only worked from 8 to 4 o'clock every day, not on weekends. And we don't have time to come tell your son to take his meds. That's his choice. So call us if he becomes dangerous. So this time I didn't have to lie. My son, my ex-wife locked herself in the bathroom. My son was ranting and raving. So I went over there, and I could see how badly he was doing. And I called that very same dispatcher, and I said, look, you please come. My son is violent. And he goes, oh, wait, is your son dangerous or violent? And I thought, okay, he's playing a word game with me. I said, he's violent. And he said, oh, we don't come if they're violent. You call the police. Yeah. And the police came and shot my son twice with a taser and carted him away. Now, that was the beginning of 5 years and 6 years, actually, and 5 hospitalizations. But eventually, and this is another long story, but it's really, I really think it captures how much we can do to help people like this, people who get sick. It's an illness. It's not. Anyway, so last time was around Thanksgiving, and he knew he could tell I was off. I could tell he was off his meds, and he was worried I was going to call the police. So he took off, and I called, and he finally answered his phone. And he said, "I'm going to heaven. Leave me alone." Well, of course, that doesn't make you feel well, Peter. He ended up in North Carolina running out of gas. I called him and I said, look, he called me and I said, look, we'll get you some gas. We'll get you back home, and he says, no, you don't understand. If I step out of this car, I'm going to die. And I said, well, what? He said, the voices are telling me I'm going to die. And Peter, we know that's ridiculous, but if voices were telling you right now that if you ended this interview, you were going to die, well, we'd talk forever.
Indeed. Oh, no, indeed.
So I did what no father should do. I arranged for him to get gas. He drove up 95, 4 hours, went off the road twice, didn't hit anybody, wasn't arrested. And by this time, I'd been told, become his partner, not his parent. Don't argue. Don't try to tell him his delusions are ridiculous. Try to figure out how you can help him and move him towards treatment. And he said, there's a safe house. I want to go into it. I want to think. And I said, great. So I took him to the safe house. Well, in the middle of the night, he got up, took off all his clothes, because when you take off your clothes, you know, you're invisible, and went walking down the street. But listen to what happened this time. This time, a crisis intervention team trained officer, and you have those in Denver, saw him, and he said, hey, buddy, it's not good to be walking down the street naked. Why don't you get in the squad car and we'll run over to the hospital? And my son said, don't handcuff me. That's when I got tasered. Don't handcuff me. And the officer used his discretion, didn't handcuff him, put him in the back of a squad car, and said, what kind of music you like? And my son said, oh, I love rap music. And he goes, oh, and he turned on a rap station. When they got to the hospital, my son said, man, this is better than a taxi ride. Thank you. And then the guy stuck around, and he said, let's see what the doctor says. And the doctor said, well, yeah, it's not a sign of dangerous walking around naked, so we're not going to admit him. And the officer looked at him and said, okay, I'm going to look up where you live, and I'm going to drop him off in your neighborhood.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, my son got in through the hospital, and he got a case manager, and this woman literally saved my son's life. She was amazing. And she said to him, why don't you take your medication? And Peter, my son's 7 psychiatrists, only 2 have ever bothered to learn his name and his something about his symptoms. And that's because they're going to issue a prescription, write a pill, and send you out the door in 15 minutes to a social worker. But treating the mind requires treating the heart too. And he found a doctor who actually listened to him and said, why don't you take your meds? Well, I've gained 100 pounds. I can't have sex. I can't drink. And those things are important to a young man. And, you know, and so he worked with him. He got him a drug with a few side effects, and he started taking it and started losing his weight. And then the case manager said, you shouldn't live with your father. You know, and I thought, well, that's silly. I'm an empty nester now, my wife and I. He could live here. And she said, no, you need to be responsible. So she put him in an apartment with 2 guys with schizophrenia. And it was amazing, Peter. It just really, all of a sudden, he was on his own. And then she said, what are you going to do with your life? And he said, well, what can I do? I have a mental illness. And she said, knock it off. Control the illness. Don't let it control you. So he got a job. He was the cart boy at a Home Depot picking up carts. And here he is now. He's 30 years old. He's got a college degree, and he's picking up carts, you know, and he gets depressed. And his case manager comes see him and says, man, you're doing great. And he thought she was mocking him. He said, no, come to my group and talk to people who, like you, had been arrested and are struggling. So he went, and he realized he was doing great. And he went from being someone who needed help to being someone who helped others. And that made a huge difference. And she said, well, I got the perfect program. It's called Peer-to-Peer, a person with mental illness helping someone with mental illness. So he went through all the classes. He got licensed. And today my son works as a peer-to-peer specialist for Arlington County. He went back to school. He has his master's degree in social work. And let me brag just real briefly about him. Guy, 300 pounds, schizophrenia, living in his parents' basement, hadn't been out of the house for 2 years. And my son goes over and starts talking to him and gets a relationship going and gets him to go out, and they go to McDonald's. Not my choice, but they go to McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
And that's not a big thing unless that's your kid. If that's your kid, then it's a big thing. So I'm very proud of him. He's doing great. And that's what we have to realize. Most people, even those with serious mental illnesses, can do better. They can have lives filled with joy and success, but they have to get the services they need to get better. And Peter, much to our shame, we just don't provide them. Yeah. Instead, we send them to jail. It's cheaper and easier, and get them off the street, and let's just get rid of them.
When all that mainstreaming started, and I not anymore, but there was a time when I wrote crime stories for Denver Magazine, and when they mainstreamed all of these people, much like your son, they just created a class of victims. That's all they did. And
They did, and
yeah,
no, it was the deinstitutionalization. Let's
That's
empty
right.
out all these institutions.
yeah, that's right.
And we're going to take care of them. We'll pay for
That's right.
housing and
That's
all
right.
this kind of stuff. Well, then what happened is that coincided with a shift in our mood in the
Mhm.
country. We elected Ronald Reagan,
Mhm.
and Reagan came to Washington. We said, go to Washington and cut the government. And he did. And he made his promises true. And he cut the very programs that everybody said we were going to use. And so what happened is these people moved into
Apartments.
jail, prisons,
Yep.
and substandard assisted living
Mhm.
facilities, and homeless on the streets. And you people in Denver understand the danger. Well, look, most people with mental illness are victims. They don't cause the violence. They're victims of violence.
That's what they
But
did.
there is a small subset, when untreated and can't get the help they need, who act out violently. And you certainly know that in Denver.
Well, what I saw, and Dick Lamb was governor, and I was writing for the old Denver Magazine, and they were putting guys up in apartments, and they were actually giving them checks. And at that time, I started to become friends, and I was aiming towards sobriety, and I met the late, great Bob Cote. And Cote just exposed all of it. And it was Dems and Republicans that thought, and that's why I love you and just love your work, is they thought they were doing the right thing.
Right.
And you couldn't fault them for, oh, I'm going to just take this mentally ill guy and get him killed. But a lot of those guys, they ended up victims of crimes. That's who they were.
Yeah.
People rolled them and mugged them and took them in confidence and then stole from them. And it was horrible. And
when I did my book, I ended up, when my son ended up getting arrested, I
Mhm.
decided I'd really write a book about this. And I ended up, LA, Los Angeles County Twin Towers was being billed as the largest public mental facility de facto in the country. And I went out there and I lasted 2 days before they threw me out because they really didn't like what I was seeing. I tried Cook County and Chicago next. They said no. I tried Rikers Island.
Mhm.
They said no. I tried Baltimore. They said no. I tried Washington, D.C., and they actually said hell no.
Yeah.
And I ended up in Miami. And I went down there and I spent time following people with mental illness out on the street to see what really happened to them. And to go to what you're saying, now you're talking about a period right after deinstitutionalization. But when I did my research, a girl named April Hernandez, she'd been framed by her parents. Her parents had conspired with relatives to accuse her of stealing a car. Why? Because they wanted her off the street. Why? Because she was psychotic, living in South Beach, where she'd been gang raped twice and beaten 3 times by people who thought it was hilarious to beat and roll homeless people. And so it's a tragedy we have. There are ways to fix it, and that's what I've been trying to do for the last more than a decade, trying to call attention to jails and prisons. I've been out to Denver a couple times, quite frankly,
man,
and senior facilities out there, and people. Look, the majority of people have a big heart, and all of us in some way often are touched by mental illness. There's very few families that escape it. And when you consider that 40% of persons with bipolar disorder have co-occurring drug and alcohol problems from self-medicating, a lot of people don't see the mental illness, but that factors in. But we abandon these people. A psychiatrist, quite frankly, really doesn't want to treat someone with schizophrenia. It's an awful illness. It's very hard to help somebody with schizophrenia, and they can be scary. And so you end up with psychiatrists preferring to treat the so-called worried well, people like me who'd gotten divorced and then remarried and trying to have problems. You know, you have problems in ordinary life.
Can relate.
Rather than somebody who, rather than somebody who's on the street yelling and screaming at you.
This is.
But there are ways to do it, and you know, Denver has some exciting programs out there. But most communities, there has to be a tragedy, and then they set up crisis intervention team trained officers who know how to deal with people with mental illness. And then the next step is they go, well, wait a minute, just having an officer realize it's mental illness doesn't really help because you still end up in jail. So they created mental health dockets or mental health courts where you go and they say, okay, obviously Pete Earley's son didn't have a criminal record. He's psychotic. He broke in to take a bubble bath. Clearly, this is not someone with criminal intent. It's not someone who is, you know, a sociopath. It's somebody who clearly was ill. And so then you go through a mental health court and have a chance to have your record expunged or a chance to get into treatment. And then they have post-diversion where it's not enough to get somebody into treatment. They got to have somewhere to go. And that's the biggest problem. I just spoke to a sheriff's association, and these are the leading people demanding change because they don't want people with mental illness in their jails and prisons because they don't belong there. So the problem is, you don't have enough local treatment. You don't have drop-in centers. You don't have clubhouses. You don't have housing. Right now, this national housing crisis hits everybody, and it hits the persons with mental illness the hardest because they aren't there.
Let me do this. That was one of the all-time great segments. I have to take a turnaround, and from here, Pete takes us to. Well, Hot House, I'd like you to talk about Leavenworth, but now the guys that you write about who are really the reason why Florence is there. This, ladies and gentlemen, is I've never spoken to him before, but I've finished his fourth book. It's No Human Contact, but Pete Earley is here, and it is just, it's unbelievable to have you here. So could I get you to hold on, sir? We'll pay some bills and come back. Pay some bills. And that book about his son was just devastating stuff. 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. This is Denver's talk station. And at noon, we'll talk with Robbie Farrow from Mile High. This is the 39th annual toy runs coming up. The Black Eyed Pea of Colorado. I'm texting right now with the guys from the P. Locally owned and operated by Steve and Michelle. Great restaurants, home-style cooking, worth going out for. 8 locations. There's sure to be one near you. And the last time you took your family out at the P. Thanksgiving at the P. They got daily specials. They got senior discounts. They're winky winky. Be sure to check the new menu items, the stuffed spuds, 8 different delicious baked potatoes. And they got the chopped steak spud. They got the sweet pork spud. They got the meat, my favorite, the meatloaf stuffed spud, broccoli cheese stuffed spud, and more. Everybody at your party will find something favorite for themselves. Make your dinner party, rehearsal dinner, wedding reception, company event, lunch, dinner, a success with the Black Eyed Pea. No matter what the occasion, the Peas gift cards are great. So whether you purchase them for your spouse, birthday favors, holiday presents, they got you covered. And I love everything about the restaurants, and the owners are magnificent folks. They're just good people. Everything about the Black Eyed Peas. There's one near you. Keep it in Colorado, the Black Eyed Pea near you.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Potpourri restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
And good morning, everybody. 710 KNUS. What a remarkable morning. Just an incredible guest. I'm Peter Boyles. Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, the 16th of November, 2024. 303-696-1971. 52 will be the high today. Our guest is Pete Earley. If you missed that first segment, oh boy. I mean, that was the second of Earley's books that I read. The first one was Hot House. He explained how he ended up working inside of Leavenworth. Then I read Witsec. Can I mean, I don't know how your time is this morning, but I've been having these questions run around in my head for at least 10 years. What do you think of Sammy Gravano, real quick? And what do you think again of Henry Hill? Those two men.
Well, I actually talked to Henry Hill, and that Goodfellas is such a great movie. Gravano, it really, it's funny. It's funny. He got into witness protection. He got right back into crime.
Oh yeah.
But now I understand he has his own website and
he's got his own show. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty wild how things have changed. But the witness protection was a fascinating book to do because it really changed how we broke the back of the mob.
That's right.
And
That's right.
I was fortunate enough to be teamed with the guy who came up with the idea, and it was a wild ride. People say, everybody goes, oh man, I wish some fantasy had I could just disappear and be born again. I could nobody know who I was and blah. It's the worst thing that can possibly happen to you, because when you lose your past, you lose all your memories and you lose your identity. And unless you're, facing execution by the mob, it's not something that you want to do willy-nilly. There was one fella who actually testified against the mob who went into the program, and he regretted it his whole life because it just disrupted his life so much.
I did that by phone, 2 interviews with Henry Hill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, two times. And once when he did a cookbook, which will, Pete did. I mean, it was like, and, when people ask me what was it like to talk to him, he had written another book, and, Moss's great book about why was called Wise Guys, I think is what originally was called. And, he had no regrets. I'm thinking, and he wasn't even worried about somebody whacking him anymore. He thought he was, but God, he was just please.
When I went into the prison in Leavenworth, first of all, it was the highest prison. They rank prisons in the BLP from, the country clubs, where I went to a country club prison and they're sitting around playing Scrabble, waiting for the therapy class. And one guy looks down and he says, how many blanks are there? Because there's 8 on this table, I mean, that's what you're running. And then you go to Leavenworth, which is the highest prison, maximum security prison at the time, where people actually were released from their cells and they were out all day until they were locked back up. And this is the environment. I walk in. Now, a guy comes up to me. Everybody knew I was a reporter because Peter, if I said to you, I'm a radio host, you'd know in a minute I was lying. Well, criminals are the same way. I mean, absolutely the same way. They can tell if you're faking it, selling wolf tickets. So anyway, guy comes up to me the very first day and he says, I can tell you're weak and you'd be preyed on. And so I figure he's trying to intimidate me because I signed a waiver. If I got kidnapped, that's my problem, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I said, how can you tell I'm weak? He said, you walked in here. This is a total racist environment. You walked in and you nodded at 4 black inmates.
Mm-hmm.
And so nodding at them, why would you do that? The only reason you do that is you're afraid of them. I mean, and so therefore you're weak. I mean, that's the subtle world you enter. And, I tell about Carl Boyles, who he's a sexual predator. He wants to find a punk. He sees this really good looking kid that comes in, right? He goes over and he asks him one question. And based on that one question, he figures out he's a pedophile. What was the question? He said, "Where'd you kick in from?"
Yeah.
And the guy says, "I kicked in from Michigan." And the only reason a state joint gives up somebody like that is if you're a cop, or you are so mean they can't handle you, or you're a pedophile trying to keep you out of the state. And he knew he wasn't a cop, and he knew he wasn't a mean son of a gun. So he knew he was a pedophile. You don't mess with pedophiles in prison because they're going to be snitches. Why are they snitches? Because the correctional officer is going to come up and say, "Hey, if everybody finds out you're a pedophile,
you're dead.
You're dead.
You're
man.
a dead man."
And so you're going to start giving me information. So Carl immediately backed away from this kid, and within a week, the kid had turned in information about a knife being found, a shank being found, and they both went there. I mean, the kid got sent to another joint, and the officer got credit for finding a knife. That's the world you're in.
There's a term I've heard that they say short eyes or small eyes, when that means they're pedophiles, and they almost have to live alone or live with other people like themselves, or they're or they're dead men.
Yeah,
they're dead men.
Yeah.
God.
Well, and that's because one of the unreported facts that I found out a lot about was there's a tremendous amount of childhood trauma, and one of the guys we're going to talk about, Thomas Silverstein, has that, but a lot of brutality. And these people have been, a lot of them were victimized when they're young. And so, but anyway, the whole thing about rape in prison is about power and about forcing someone. It's not about sex as much as it's, I mean, you can there are guys in Leavenworth who took their tighty whities and dyed them pink and made it clear that they were willing to do whatever you wanted sexually for cigarettes or whatever. That was back in the day when some of them could have cigarettes, but that's not what they were looking for. You're looking for somebody to dominate and to control. One guy, Carl Boyles, who's dead now, but he had a young man who everybody assumed was his punk. And one day I said to him, I was trying to subtly bring it up. And you kind of watch it when you're talking to a guy who's murdered 3 people, trying to talk about sex with him and his partner. And I said to him, you're more than friends. This is like a marriage. And he goes, "No, it's better than a marriage. Wives talk."
Yeah. I was in the terror, excuse me, I have to clear my throat. I was eating a piece of food piece of cheese off air.
There you go, a little morning snack.
Oh,
That's
it's
great.
just cheese for breakfast.
I mean, this guy, Carl, could not even talk without Carl's permission. And, what's interesting about that is the guy got out of Leavenworth, and I tracked him down to Florida. He got to a lower prison. I said to him, "God, that must have been terrible having him, as you're basically a slave to this guy." And he goes, No, it was great. And I said, "How was it great?" He said, "If Carl hadn't protected me, I would have been passed around.
Right. That's right.
And I would have had all kinds of people, forcing me to do things." So nobody messed with Carl. And so I was willing to do whatever he wanted. And then you know what happened with this guy? He ended up going to another prison, and he turned into the predator. He started, picking on somebody else. So that's the atmosphere or what can happen.
The story that, before I gagged, I was in Territorial, and we were there for 3 days. We were covering the execution of Gary Davis, and the warden was a great guy, and the COs were great. And so I was eating lunch and dinner with them, and kind of walking through the yard, and we were going up. This is weird. I've never told the story on air, but we're walking up the stairs, and down the stairs comes a woman, and makeup, hair, certain way they wore their shirts, tight pants, the whole thing. And there was like 5 guys, 3 behind one, or they in a protection. My mind doesn't come across. And I thought, oh, she must be working here in food service. I'm telling you, that's what I thought. And I turned to the warden. The warden said, "That's a guy. That's a man, and he is being protected. He's having sex with those guys or whomever it was.
Right.
But I mean, makeup, hair. I mean, from the shoulders up, it was a woman.
Yeah.
And I mean,
yeah. Well, people adapt. You know.
Oh boy.
The thing about going to Leavenworth was it was just such a different culture, and it affects you even as a visitor going in and spending 23 hours in this environment.
Oh.
But it's the funny things you learn. Like, for instance, when were most stabbings at Leavenworth? They happen between 4 and 5 o'clock before dinner. Why? Because everybody got off work. They had Unicor there, which is prison industries.
Mm-hmm.
And what do guys do when they get off work? Well, they go back to their cell and they sit on the john, sit on the toilet. And so if you walk down the cell block, you'd see these guys and they'd have one leg out of their pants. Why? Because if somebody's going to burst in your cell with a shank and come after you, you didn't want to stand up and fall over. I think it's kind of a little long story, but
Can I do this because I'm being told at break time. I want you to stay as long as you'd like. We haven't even gotten to the book yet. Pete Earley is here. Put you on hold, sir. Human Contact is this, and by the way, his publisher is Citadel. I'm reading it in paperback. The other books, I don't know who his publisher is. I think it's Citadel. Well, Citadel, we'll ask him when he comes back on the other side. 303-696-1971 is the number. This guy's so important. Saturday, November the 16th, I'm Peter Boyles, 2024. 52 will be the high, 28 tonight, and 50 on Sunday. Stay right here, please. Radio just doesn't get any better than this. It is a Saturday morning, November the 16th, 2024. I'm Peter Boyles. It's 10:52, 8 before the hour. 52 will be the high today. And for years and years, I have read this man. And the latest book is No Human Contact. His name is Pete Earley. And why is Florence, Colorado there? Supermax. And that'd be a good way to begin. But these two guys, Silverstein and Fountain. Pete, I don't even know. You said, and again, I didn't put the book down. You meet Thomas Silverstein when you're doing Hot House, right?
Yes, in 1987. Can I tell you one quick story
sure.
about Hot House?
Of course.
I know you got another segment, but so this guy's telling me in prison, he says, it's not enough to identify a mouse. You have to get the mouse in the right hole. And I said, what are you talking about? And this shows these guys' mentality. He said, you can go to a shopping mall and sit there and think, okay, who was I going to mug? And of course, it's not going to be the big, bulky guy. You're going to pick on the little old lady who's pushing a stroller, right? Okay, or somebody who's obviously not going to give you a big fight. That's just identifying a mouse. So he says, look, there's a guy who comes into prison, and he first gets into the cell, and he leaves his cell, and someone steals all his clothes. Now, nothing happens for 2 weeks. Why? Because it may be related to Sammy Gravato. You don't know. Just because he looks weak doesn't mean he's not connected. So 2 weeks go by and nothing happens. So they know he's not connected. So the guy wearing his clothes goes up to the guy who's been, he's lost his clothes. And he says, hey, I heard somebody stole your clothes. And the guy says, oh, just leave me alone. I don't want trouble. Wrong answer.
That's
Guy
it.
pushes him downstairs. That guy freaks out. The guy says to him, you have to pay me $50 a week or I'm going to kill you. The guy runs to the correctional officers. Both of them get arrested and shipped off to different prisons, okay, to separate them. That's identifying a mouse, but not getting him through the right hole. So then the guy shows me, he says, look over there. And there's a weak-looking guy sitting next to this Hell's Angel. So he's coming into prison, and he have a 2-week orientation period. And the Hell's Angel guy overheard that he had a brother who worked for Iowa Beef Processors. So he knows the guy's got money, right? So he goes up to the guy during this 2-week of isolation period, and he goes, hey, I've never met anybody like you, and he befriends him. So they get out, and the guy gets handed his clothes, and he's walking up to his cell, and 4 guys come in and attack him. And they're beating him. They're going to pull down his pants. They're going to rape him. And the Hell's Angel guy comes by and goes, oh, whoa, wait a minute. That's my buddy. Don't do that. Leave him alone. And so they all run away and then the guy says, oh, thank you for saving me. He goes, yeah, but I can't put my life on the line for nothing. You're going to have to pay me $50 a week if you want protection. Yeah. So he set the whole thing up. He hired the guys to go and attack him. Sure. But even if the guy knows that, what's he going to do? I mean, he was the savior. So that's identifying the mouse and getting him through the right hole. And that shows, I remember standing one day looking out the windows of Leavenworth, and it's snowing. And the guy I'm talking to goes, man, it's snowing. Great day to rob a bank.
That's
Leavenworth.
We did a radio show in the federal penitentiary on Kipling, and I met a bank robber, and he's gone now. He passed away, but befriended. I had lunch with him, and I said, "Tell me about robbing banks." And he said to me, "You take everything about women, sex, fast cars." He went down to drugs. He went down this litany of things. He said, "What?" He said, "You think about it?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I feel greater than all of that when I walk into a bank." He's a bank robber, and I used to send him books and stuff, and he was what they call the big bitch. He was third time for banks. He wasn't coming out, and he died in there. But you think about these guys, go ahead, please.
No, there was one point where we thought we could cure crime. The Bureau of Prisons in the 60s said therapy, vocation, and give them a job, give them therapy, and give them an education. And it didn't work.
And
then we've had Hell's Island, where you take people and you literally beat them to death and they die, and that didn't work.
No.
So there's always, 85% of the people in the prison just wanted to do their time and go home.
Pete,
15% caused.
they're telling
the
me
problem.
I'm not paying attention because you're
Right.
so good. I got let me hang on, bring you back on the other side, okay? And we'll start with the
Yep.
while you're here, no human contact. Pete Earley it's just a magnificent guest. Thank you, everybody. Hang on. We'll come back on very, very quickly. 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. 52 The High today. 50 Sunday. It is 10:58, and it's Radio Free Denver.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Potpourri restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
Slick Ric Flair and Bret the Hitman Hart. Best there is, the best there was, and the best there's ever going to be. It is a Saturday morning with a fabulous guest, November 16th, 2024. I'm Peter Boyles. The weather goes 52 today, 28 tonight, 50 on Sunday. Our guest, and it's one of these things to tell the guy, yeah, come stay at the house. Pete Earley is here. I've been a reader of Pete Earley's, I don't know for how long. It's the first time I've ever had an opportunity to actually speak with him, and this book is No Human Contact. What I should have done, Pete, is said, where do people get all the books, and how can people, get the kinds of things that I'm telling you are so great to read? If you would, please.
Well, that's very kind of you. They can get them on Amazon or on Barnes & Noble. That's how people buy books nowadays. And they're all on there. Just look at Pete Earley, or you can type in crazy Pete Earley and it'll come up.
I'll tell you what.
But No Human Contact is my 22nd and probably my last book. And it describes my 33-year relationship with Thomas Silverstein, who, along with Clay Fountain, is really responsible for Florence ADX and changing the whole philosophy of the Bureau of Prisons. I was in Leavenworth in '87, and I kept hearing about this guy who was the most hated convict in the Bureau of Prisons system. Everybody hated his guts who worked for correctional officers. Yet, among inmates, he was revered kind of as a modern day hero, a Superman. And he was there. When I met him, they warned me. They said, he'll grab right through the bars. Don't wear a clip-on tie.
Yeah, the tearaway tie.
Don't wear a real tie.
I thought that was
he'll
great.
Reach through and choke you. So we go down in the bowels of, and I'm talking basement of this prison. There's no sounds. There's storage. And we go to this room, and they take me in, and they opened a first group of bars, and they put me in there, and they close them. And then the second set is he's behind that. And I'm geared up. I mean, what kind of person? And this guy appears, he hasn't shaved because they won't give him a razor. His hair's long. I didn't know it at the time, but he only had cold water in his cell, absolutely no sound. And he looked up at the fluorescent lights, and it's buzzing. And he says, "Welcome to my world." I mean, he was there. So what this guy did, and we can go into great detail about it, when he and Clay Fountain on one day in 1983 in Marion, Illinois, which replaced Alcatraz, he murdered a correctional officer, and Clayton Fountain, another wannabe member of the Aryan Brotherhood, attacked 3 officers and murdered 1. And so at that time, Peter, there was no federal death penalty. So Norm Carlson, the head of the Bureau of Prisons, said, I got to protect my own people. And these guys, Silverstein had already racked up 3 bodies. He'd been charged with a 4th, but they couldn't prove that. Clay Fountain had killed 4 people before this. So he said, we got to do, so he came up with what he told me was no human contact. Now, what is that? People talk about being in solitary. No, this is worse. For the first 10 months after they murdered the correctional officer, Silverstein was stripped to his boxers. He was in a cell the size of a king mattress. He could touch the ceiling. It was all sheet metal around him, had a solid door. The lights were on 24 hours a day. There was no radio, no TV, no outside communication with the world. And in fact, no letters, no telephone calls. He was left in this cell they hoped, quite frankly, that he'd end his own life. But, he'd been in trouble from the time he was a little kid. He was used to being in jails and prisons, and he found a way, a very clever way, to survive without having any kind of communication, literally. He knew what time it was based on meals. And so what he did was, none of the officers would speak to him, but when an officer opened his food sleigh, he heard that this guy was a born-again Christian. And so Silverstein said, will you pray with me? And the guy said, no. and just handed the food through. Well, he kept doing that. And then one day the guy slipped a Bible through. And that's how Thomas Silverstein literally learned how to read and write, was with that Bible. But what they discovered, Peter, is that you can't take everything away from someone and control them. Because what do? I mean, you hand the food tray through, and the guy, they say, hand it back. And he says, no, what are you going to do? Every time you're going to go in and have a big fight. So they started easing up after 10 months, and they started giving him art supplies, and that's how they started to create his behavior modification. Was, if you want to have contact with the outside world, if you want to write to people, because under the Constitution, you're only entitled to so much air and so much food and so much space. That's it. And so he and Clay Fountain spent their entire life inside this and isolated from other inmates. And what happened then was Norm Carlson went to the Congress and he said, look, we can't control these people. They get 3 or 4 or 5 bodies. They're members of gangs. They're just going to keep killing. They're killing officers. We need something. And so Congress acted 2 ways. 1, it went to reinstate the death penalty. And 2, it said, where can we build a facility for these worst of the worst? Because the gangs had just exploded in prisons. And they said, let's build a supermax penitentiary. And they chose Florence, Colorado. And this is a highly controlled environment where everyone basically is in an isolation cell. You have a solid door, then you open that, then there's bars, and then the person's in there. Yeah. And even in there, they have their own little miniature prison, a black hole, and that's where Silverstein initially was sent, which total isolation. The only other person under that being held that way is Rousseff. I can't remember Yusuf. I can't remember his name.
The shoe bomber.
The World Trade Center.
Right.
Yeah, he was
not the
World
shoe bomber,
Trade Center
but
bomber.
he was the planner. That's right.
Yeah.
So
I met this guy in '78 or in '87, and I thought, I want to know everything about him. And
can I reset real quick, because people come and go. Our guest is, for me, it's like I've read so much of his work, and this is first chance, hopefully not the last chance I get to speak to Pete Earley. And this book is No Human Contact, but it's in a series almost of decline and fall. I mean, I try to see you in a pattern, and there is a pattern to your work, but one seems to be better always than the last. And by the way, I'm going to put a cap. No, it's true. But you also, by the way, not consistently, but Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, turns up in your writing. And I wanted to get your take on the Birdman, but come back to where you were about meeting Thomas.
Well, I met him, and I wanted to know what made him tick. And so usually when you write a book, you write your book and then you go on to another subject, and you don't stay in touch with the people you write about, especially if they're convicts or criminals or whatever, But I wanted to stick with him because I was really curious. He was seen as in the Bureau of Prison as such an evil person, and on the other side he was this hero, and I wanted to know how did he get there. And so I researched his life. I got to know him. We spent 33 years corresponding. I said, you should write your life story. I was helping him with that, and he died. Died of natural causes, and in 2019. So I took what he had written, and I used his own words and No Human Contact to describe from his point of view what it's like to be in prison. And it led to a lot of interesting discussions because, for instance, I sort of made him famous in the hothouse, and he developed a real following. But he said to me, you don't understand until you are in prison and have somebody controlling you just what this life is like. And you can describe a 4-point, but until you're stripped naked and you're chained, all your limbs are chained down, and you're sitting there defecating on yourself with rats running through your cell or whatever, you can't even scratch your nose, and you sit there for hours, that's when you really understand what this is like. And so those were the kind of insights. I wanted him to have a voice. And it's controversial because obviously he hates the Bureau of Prisons and he really detested the officers who worked with him there. But anyway, so Norm Carlson, I kind of got off subject, went for the death penalty, but he also said we need a supermax where we can isolate and control by remote control doors and get these worst of the worst, and then we'll make them work down to lesser joints if they follow the rules, behavior modification. And it really, Peter, I talked about how in the 60s they thought they could cure crime, and Norm Carlson's view was we don't punish inmates, it's isolation from society that punishes them. But after this, the Bureau P changed that to we do punish convicts. We put them in supermaxes, and 42 other states have followed that. And so he really changed the face of corrections because of these awful murders he committed.
How many people, convicts and corrections officers, is Silverstein good for? How many did he murder?
Well, he only murdered one officer, but he had So what happens is Thomas Silverstein, first of all, he has this mother who is really out of a horror story.
Virginia.
So thrilled you read my book. I mean, he's a bedwetter at like age 5, and his mother makes him drink his own urine to punish him and beats him almost daily. And he grows up in this very violent family and gets in trouble early on, gets into drugs early on, and violence works for him. I mean, you can be the clown of the class, but if you punch somebody in the nose, then you're going to get their attention. He eventually gets arrested for bank robbery with his father, his birth father, who was not Jewish. His name was Thomas Conway. Tom Silverstein was adopted by his stepfather, Sidney Silverstein, and people wonder how somebody with a Jewish last name could be in the Aryan Brotherhood, but that's the explanation. He goes to San Quentin. Now, San Quentin in 1975, when he arrived there, was in the midst of a race war. And what I mean, a wonderful book written by Ed Bunker about life inside. Did you ever see Reservoir Dogs?
Yes, I did.
He's in that. He was a convict who became a Hollywood star. Described how you open the cells and black guys and white guys would run out and Hispanics run out, and it didn't matter if they knew you or not. You were kill on sight. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting, Peter, because the gangs had developed in the 75s. There was the Black Guerrilla Family, which was the revolutionary black gang. There was a Mexican mafia, and then there was the, I can't ever say it correctly, the family, Nostra Familia. And they were these gangs, and they always got their members by getting as many soldiers as they could. Well, whites understood in 75 in San Quentin, they'd never outnumber the minorities. And so the Aryan Brotherhood came about as a white gang, and to distinguish itself, it became the most ruthless, limited, blood in, blood out. You had to kill someone to get in it kill someone for the gang, and you die. The only way out was blood. But they were so vicious that their small numbers dominated the others. And so the other gangs were hiring them to kill, contract killings, bring in drugs. And in fact, it's kind of interesting. The Aryan Brotherhood was hired by John Gotti when he ended up going in prison to protect himself.
Yeah, he got beat. Yeah, he got beat.
Yeah, and they were taking advantage of him. They wanted to extort money for him. But anyway, Silverstein goes into this prison, and all chances of rehabilitation, quite frankly, were gone. He identified with the Aryan Brotherhood, so he ends up getting sent out of the state joint to do his federal time for bank robbery. He lands in Leavenworth, and the first death he's accused of is a guy who is accused of bringing drugs in for the gang, and he's accused of murdering him. He actually, a court later rules that he was framed, that he didn't do that murder, but he was convicted. And by the time they overturned it, he already was in Marion. And Marion replaced Alcatraz. And what they were doing was sending the worst of prisoners from every institution there. And the thing got totally out of hand. Violence ruled. And so he arrives there, and he immediately gets into it. The Mexican mafia asked him to kill one of the other inmates, Robert Chappelle. So he and Clayton Fountain, it's kind of interesting how they did this. So Chappelle is lying in his cell with his head against the front of the cell where the bars are, watching an NFL football game. And these guys have a garrote that they made, a wire, and so they walk down the cell. Back in those days, they let people out to exercise running up and down the cell block. So they run up to his cell, they throw this wire around his neck, and they strangle him. And then they're convicted of that. That was his first murder.
Didn't they have to
convicted of?
Didn't they kind of have to figure out how in the hell they did it? Because didn't they found the guy under the bed, right? Or his head was under the bed. Yeah.
Oh, you read my book. Thank you.
Of course.
And they tried to figure it out. And then it was interesting because other gang members said, no, we did it, because they already had life sentences. So when they took away the death penalty, they had nothing really to fear after you get 2 or 3. So then what happens, and this is probably the most outrageous one, Cadillac Smith is a known prison rapist. He came out of D.C. He was the head of what was called the D.C. Black, or the Moors. And this guy was one mean SOB. I mean, he shot witnesses in front of other people, and nobody would come forward, testify. He was ruthless. He goes into prison. He was famous for being hit someone and knocking them out with one punch, and then raping them after they were knocked out.
Who's the guy that? Is he the one that kept the kid in his cell?
Yeah, no, that was another one, but he was a relative of his.
Okay.
And yeah, that was a case in Leavenworth where they put this guy in a cell with this known rapist, and the guy beat him up and took all his food and kept him in there for 3 days, molesting him, until they finally discovered it. Anyway, he was related to Cadillac Smith. And so Cadillac Smith comes in, and he was also related to Robert Chappelle. And he says, you crackers, I'm going to get you, blah, blah, blah. And this is what is irritating about this. So everyone knew that Cadillac Smith was trying to kill Silverstein. In fact, he'd been caught trying to stab him. He created a zip gun with matches and to try to shoot him. So everybody knew this. And so at this point, because of the death of Chappelle, they had built a recreation cage on the cell block. In other words, you didn't run up and down the cells anymore. You had to go into this cage, all right? So Silverstein and Fountain get a hacksaw blade smuggled in. Actually, another inmate had brought in a piece of hacksaw, get this, up his nose. And he used the hacksaw to cut where the cell, the rec cage was. And so they're waiting, and they hear that Cadillac Smith is going to the shower. And they watch Cadillac Smith, and he always had a towel over his arm, because at that point, the Bureau of Prisons had towel rods that were like you'd see in a cheap motel, just a bar. And they'd take that off and make it into a shank, And so they knew he was armed. Well, Silverstein didn't have a shank, but Clay Fountain did. So they bust out of the rec cage while Cadillac Smith is going down to take his shower. And Clay Fountain is the first one. And by that time, he had already had 2 murders under his belt. And so he's running down to attack Cadillac Smith. Cadillac Smith turns around, pulls out his own shank, and he stabs Fountain, who falls back. Silverstein flies into Cadillac Smith without a shank, manages to take his shank away from him, and stabs him more than 40 times, trying to cut his head off. And the officers are watching this because nobody wants to go in there. You have to understand, it's not like the movies where everybody had the guard walks where they have rifles and they can shoot down, and they can do that in state joints, but not the federal joint. And so the only thing officers could do was show up and get out nightsticks. And so they're behind the bars watching this because these two guys are notorious killers, and who wants to run in there and try to separate them, right? So eventually Silverstein drags Cadillac Smith's body down the tier, making racial slurs and saying, you know, I'm going to get you guys, etc. So then he gives it up. So that murder then leads him to say, okay, the wreck cage didn't work. So now whenever this guy leaves the cell, he has to have 3 officers with him. Now, according to Silverstein, Merrill Klutz is this cowboy, 40-year-old guy who's worked in prisons all his life. And you're supposed to only work in this unit for 6 months. He's been there 2 years because he is one of the only ones who can get control of these places. All right. So Silverstein and him start bumping heads. And Silverstein claims he starts harassing him. He won't bring him his food, or he, you know, dumps the food in the trash and then brings him an empty tray and messes with his art, all this kind. So Silverstein develops this fixation on him. And you mentioned Robert Stroud, the Birdman Alcatraz. Other inmates are saying to him, hey, don't kill an officer. You'll never get out, man. Robert Stroud never got out. You'll be doing Birdman status. Yeah. But Silverstein fixates on him. So then what he does is Silverstein gets out to go to the shower, and they check him, and they have 3 officers, including Merrill Klutz with him, takes his shower. As he's walking back, he stops in front of a Aryan Brotherhood member's cell, a Mexican Mafia member's cell, actually. And you're not supposed to do that. But the guy unlocks his handcuffs and lifts his shirt, and he has a shank. So Silverstein turns around and says to 2 of the officers, this isn't about you, get out of here. And they boogie out, and he attacks Klutz, and he brutally murders him, stabs him multiple, I think, and again, more than 40 times, and kills this guy. And then later that day, Clay Fountain, his buddy, who was a wannabe member of the Aryan Brotherhood, is still in that same cell block, right? And he hears guards, correctional officers talking about how they're going to get even with Silverstein. Yeah. So he gets his own shank, and he attacks 3 of them and murders one of them. And so that creates this whole no human contact thing. These guys, by that time, Fountain had killed 5 people, and Silverstein was accused of killing 4. And Norm Carlson said, what am I supposed to do with these guys? We can't execute them, so we have to protect people. So then he came up with this harshest punishment. And that is what Silverstein lived under for 36 years. Eventually, they allowed him to write letters. And, you know, it's so funny, Peter, because, you know, he got girlfriends. He had a woman who married him. I mean, you know, he became this kind of celebrity. And most of the people who knew him had retired or died, but still, he eventually is sent. They create his own little suite there in Leavenworth, but then once in '94, once Florence is built, they say, okay, it's time to send him to Florence, which is the house that he helped build. And he moves off to the toughest prison in the United States. I mean, this is where the hardest of the hard are kept. And, you know, that is where he is, and he eventually dies from medical complications after serving 36 years in basically isolation.
2 things. One is when Timothy McVeigh went down there and he realized he couldn't do the time, and he requested to die. I'm told there's a part of the penitentiary there that they call Bombers Row. And it's Terry Nichols. It was Ted Kaczynski. It was
Right.
that whole, and it's just and Kaczynski went again, from friends that know more about this than I do, that Kaczynski literally could no longer even come out of his cell. He couldn't even take the hour exercise. And McVeigh, who was in great health, a young man, he chose death to get out of that. And it's insanity. And that's the only thing, after reading most of your books. And I was holding this to be, it's about time, I guess we try and put some wrap on this, but Pete, what's the lesson? What did you come away with after, all of these experiences and work that you did? What can you say?
Well, I wish I was, some brilliant diagnostician, but what was interesting about Silverstein was you could kind of see how he was groomed to end up where he was. Now, a lot of people have brutal childhoods and they don't end up murdering people, but he was really on that path. But there was one moment in his life where he could have gone straight and he didn't do it. And that's the mystery of human nature, is why would you choose this lifestyle? And the lack of empathy in murdering someone. And what I learned about Silverstein was there's a group of convicts who literally, prison is their life. That is where they function the best. And that is where they feel most at home. And so, we put correctional officers in there, and it's difficult for correctional officers not to get caught up in this whole violent atmosphere too. So it's I wish I knew the answer, but it's nurture versus nature, back and forth. He, of all the people I've ever interviewed, he was the one who, he and Clay Fountain both had such horrific childhoods and such horrific past. They basically were groomed to be the killers that they were. But by the same token, there was that one instance in Silverstein's life where he wanted to be an outlaw, and that's what he chose. And so how do you change that? And I don't know. It's the Gary Gilmore. It's all those famous convicts who, have committed murders, as opposed to people we talked about earlier who are like my son, who broke into a house to take a bubble bath, and that's the wide range of people you see in jails and prisons.
Our guest is Pete Earley, and I could do this for hours. We opened the show, and I brought up Sammy Gravano. He was probably good for 19 murders, and John Gotti, who knows?
Yep.
Is there a difference between those kinds of people and Silverstein?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Nobody's ever asked me before. I don't know Gravano that well. Obviously, he was a cold-blooded killer who, as similar, was a member of the mafia, a member of a gang. I've done books on spies too, and what you see is a lack of empathy, a lack of people are just on stage to serve your purpose. With Silverstein, though, there was a human side of him, a person who loved his kids, who had relationships, who cared about friendship. It's just, it's so easy. We want to make people look like Freddy Krueger, and a lot of times they're just there's so many grays in their lives. And that's what's always fascinated me, is why did he end up the way he was and killing the people he did? And how can we stop somebody like that? And, Florence is the answer now. Florence is, you will stay in isolation until you work your way down. But you got to realize that 80% of people, including, a smaller percentage, but still a percentage of people who end up in Florence, come back. They're released.
Yes.
They're out one day, and they walk among us. And so you have to that we haven't figured out how to change basic human behavior, I think, in many ways.
Are you working
But the book, thank you for
please. Thank you.
plugging the book. Thank you for being so kind, mentioning my books. I've really enjoyed this. And, I've spent my life, I wasn't very good at English and grammar, but I'm fascinated by people.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate during my career to, go to places most people don't go and see things that people don't get to see. And it's a mystery to me of why people are the way they are. And that's the beauty and also the horror of our human condition, I guess.
Are you working on a new book now, a new project?
I'm 73 years old, and in February I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And so I'm spending all my time. I was so thrilled to get a call from you to be on your show, because my main focus now is on my grandkids and enjoying life. I've been blessed in that they usually give you 4 months to live when you have stage 4 lung cancer, but I have immunotherapy. I'm part of 4% of the population who does well with targeted therapy, and it's in remission. So we'll see how long. But, when you have a moment like that, you reflect a lot in your life. And, there are things that I wish I hadn't done, but there are also many things that I'm very grateful for, including things like being able to go in the hot house and being able to, we haven't even talked about that, and we don't need to, but having the KGB interview me and running around Moscow and, and meeting somebody like Thomas Silverstein, as strange as that sounds, because, a guy told me once, he said, it's like people are like bottles in a plant. He said, occasionally one will come through broken and they have to discard it. And those are the most interesting ones to try to figure out.
I agree.
The villains are always more interesting than the heroes,
I'll leave you with this. I used to think I was the luckiest guy that was ever born. I think I'm talking to him. That was my take on myself. Listen,
I think you're pretty lucky. I think the luckiest person ever born, quite frankly, without getting into all this, is Donald Trump.
Count on that. Count on that. But I did. I'm sitting there listening to that. I didn't realize that your issues, but I said, Peter, you say to yourself, privately, fold them again. Luckiest guy. And then I thought, all of a sudden, it's Pete Earley. You know what? I got to tell you, no, it's true.
I don't think my first wife would agree with that, but anyway.
Hey, listen, hey, Pete, I got 2 of them that wouldn't say it, but.
What is life? It's memories, and I haven't made the kind of money that a lot of people make, but I've had a good life. I've been blessed, and even my son, my son's mental illness gave me a purpose in life, to tell you the truth.
Sure.
Much more than, spending a year in prison or, I spent a year in a casino. That was a lot more fun.
I read that book too. I read that one too, the casino book.
Yeah.
I was sitting on the couch last night. We're watching that fight or series of fights. And with my son, my grandson, and my daughter, all of us watching the fight. And I remember sitting on the couch with my dad drinking beer, watching Wednesday. It was Friday night was Gillette, and Wednesday night was Blue Ribbon Bouts. And I thought, wow, what a quantum leap! Here we are watching a fight. Way different setup, but it's time connects, doesn't it? And those guys,
yeah,
wow.
And when you're told your time is limited, you really there's a couple of things. One is, I always used to marvel at people who, were stricken with a disease and champions. What choice do you have? I mean, you can either turn into a real, downer, or you get up every day and you go about it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, it's kind of funny, because when you have stage 4 cancer, you don't have to do anything you don't want.
No,
that's say, can you do this? And you go, no, I got stage 4 cancer. I can't do that.
No, there's a
But then
part.
you focus on, it breaks your heart when you look at your grandkids,
Yeah.
and it breaks my heart for my wife who lost her first husband to cancer. So, but yeah, this is what the mystery of life is.
That's it. No,
You just don't know. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
If you ever wander back into Denver, you got to spend about 4 hours on the air just telling stories. Hey, Pete, thanks. Thank you and one more.
Thank you.
No, please tell the audience one more time how to pick up the books, please.
No Human Contact, Pete Earley. You can find it on Amazon. For years, I wrote a mental health blog. I'm not doing that now, but you can look at my websites, www.peteearley.com, and it lists most of my books. And I'm very grateful that you've had me on, and thank you for talking to me about this.
Please.
It certainly is. Mental health and also prisons have certainly affected a lot of lives there in Colorado, my old home state.
Take care of yourself, sir. We'll talk. Pick up the phone. I'm here. Thanks, Pete.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother. You
Bye-bye.
too. Wow. I didn't realize that was going on in the end of his time. That was Pete Earley. And I was drawn to that guy's work. All right. Now we go to open lines 303-696-1971. We were talking about the fight last night. We were talking about RFK Jr. We're talking about Malcom X's daughters are suing the CIA, the FBI, and the NYPD over Malcolm's murder, and the life of RFK Jr. He was I think 7 or 8 when his favorite uncle was murdered, and I think he was 14 when his father was murdered. And is there a tie-in between Malcolm and the Kennedys and all those things, and the CIA now under the gun again, and then bringing in RFK Jr. Danny Kaplis in the law firm, and we were texting over the weekend, and he's my guy. Danny suggests that if you choose a lawyer who shares your values, because you should choose someone to represent you in an injury case that says so much about you and everybody involved in the case. Danny's believed to be the only lawyer here in Colorado to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. He's also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history, the official law partner now of the Nuggets and the Avalanche. He's my friend. Dan Kaplis Law, serious firm for serious cases, accepts righteous injury cases and percentage fee basis, and represents good people, all walks of life, without regard to ability to pay. If you need his help, it's just a phone call. 303-770-5551. He helped my family. You hit Kaplis Law on the internet at caplislaw.com. We were texting funny stuff. 303-770-5551. It is Dan, CAPLIS.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Butchery Restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
Sweet home Alabama. What a remarkable hour and a half of talk radio. Saturday morning, November 16th, 2024, 52 will be the high, and then 50 on Sunday and Monday, 55 degrees. 303-696-1971 if you want to speak about Pete Earley. I thought that was amazing. We opened the show, actually, and didn't get any feet on it, but it was about that fight last night, the Netflix Live Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight. And Netflix has taken huge heat over it. The women's fight was maybe the best fight I've seen in a long time. The fight before that was a title fight, and that was really good. The opening bout was not so much, but then the Tyson fight. And if you'd like to speak about it, I'd like to talk about it. And the other part of it, we were talking, and I've been reading a lot about him, is RFK Jr. and who he is and what do you think this means. And then Malcom X's daughters are suing the CIA, the feds, and the NYPD over the murder. All right, so let's go to Rick on line one. Rick, you're on a radio show. Thank you and good morning.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for taking my call.
Oh, pleasure.
I just wanted to let you know that way back when I used to listen to you when you were reading that Hot House book, and you were so enthralled, for lack of a better term, with that book. I ran right out and bought it, and
what did you think?
Still think about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, it was incredible.
Yeah.
The Cubans.
Yes.
And I'm thinking that in our modern times here, we may be running into the Venezuelans. I'm sorry to say.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But I'd called you a couple weeks ago, and you had let me talk to you about my sobriety, how you had helped me, and that book helped me as well. Because I thought, if I get another DUI and I hurt somebody or kill them, if I'm going to Canyon City, I won't make it. So that book helped me get there as well. So to you, I thank once again.
That's kind, but you're responsible, as you well know, and you can claim that, and rightfully so. I didn't know that he was ill. I really did not know he was ill. And this book is so powerful, this No Human Contact book. And it's sort of an addendum it is an addendum to Hot House. And because that's where the first time Silverstein shows up. But what these people are like, and it's like they're so ahead of you. And in fact, the corrections officers don't go to work. They go on strike because the inmates are at war with them and tell them they're at war. And like he makes the case, they got nothing to lose. Some of them are doing triple life. What are you going to do to them? Nothing. So that's why I didn't realize why Florence was built. And it was built because of those two guys. Wow.
Well, I have collected a number of recordings over the years, records, CDs, which I still do and enjoy listening to. But today was a great example of why everybody still listens to radio. I mean, fantastic interview, great guest. So thank you.
Well, first, when we talk about how this business is done, and there's a lost, it got lost, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And, the job is about, because we're getting all kinds of nice acclaim and it's really great, but you sit down and you read the guy's book and then you get ready to do the show. You don't walk in at 2 minutes before airtime and look at each other or look at the producer and say, what are we going to do? You got to know. And when you know a guy like Pete Earley, the thing that floored me was he's on the clock, and he enjoyed the interview, I think, as well. He talked to Adam afterward, but guys like that come along and he'll floor you. I mean, guys like that. I mean, where are you going to find somebody like him? He's that good.
Yeah. It was fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah, the courage that he had to go into those penitentiaries.
I've been in. Yeah, we went into Canyon. We went into federal penitentiary on Kipling, and that kind of stuff. And it's the kinds of things you want to do. I met a guy. I met a bank robber, and we stayed in touch. He was dying in prison, and he talked all about robbing banks. I've always been intrigued by bank robbers. Me and Adam were talking off air. I said, when I'm a kid reading all those, Bonnie and Clyde and all this kind of stuff. And I got on to Pretty Boy Floyd, and all, just when I'm like 13. And I just said, hey, man, robbing banks sounds like a pretty good idea. I was telling you, there's a quick story about Pretty Boy, whose real name was Charles Arthur Floyd. So during the Dust Bowl and everything, when they're sticking up banks, and he's burning mortgages is what he's doing, and so everybody loves him. And it's the farmers and ranchers love him, but the bankers, of course, hate him. So he gets blamed for a bank that somebody gets shot in, and he didn't do it. And so he hits this bank I think in Arkansas, and he takes all the mortgages and he puts them on the floor of the bank and he lights them on fire. So the bank can't seize the farms of these farmers. And he stands in the doorway and he turns around, he looks, he said, you tell them that Charlie Arthur Floyd did rob this bank. And I read that when I'm about 13, 14 years old. And I went, whoa. You take care of yourself. Thanks, Rick. Be safe, brother. Thank you. 303-696-1971, right after this. Almost saying good afternoon, but it's still good morning. 5 to go, Saturday, Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. We go to Jay. The man told me we got 2 minutes, Jay. You're on the air. Good morning.
I got a question for you.
All right.
Therefore, when a guy goes to prison or jail or any of that stuff, they get paid by the head, by the feds and by the, whether it be Denver County or Aurora County or whatever have you. So the jails, when they get in there, and then the court systems, from people that I've known, they get in there and then they set up another 20 days before their next court hearing, and they keep them in there for like 20 days, but they get paid. It's kind of like raising cattle. So they get paid by the head, but they get a check from the county, the state, and the feds. Is that true?
I don't know. Jay, I don't know.
Because they're in business to make money too, and they have to pay their employees too.
Now there's a difference between the idea, and I can find out for us, but
because you're the wise. I called you because you're the smartest one I know.
We're both in trouble. I can. There's the private prison system, which you know about, and there's like
correct
this place that he's talking about. Well, it's federal. And the one he talked about before was federal, and Marion and Leavenworth is federal. Honest to God, Jay, I don't know, but that's a good question. I promise by next week I'll know how that works. I don't know how it works.
I didn't want to put you through some homework, but I admire your station and your knowledge, because you know a lot of things. So I appreciate you being on the radio and speaking of the things that most people won't speak of. So thank you for all that you do.
Be safe. Okay. Final hour coming up, and the toy run is coming up for the 39th time. We'll talk with Robbie Farrell and get your calls in here. 710 KNUS. We'll do a turnaround and come back on the other side and say good afternoon. I'm Peter Boyles, Radio Free Denver, 710 KNUS.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Potpourri restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
Now I get to say it. Good afternoon, everyone. Saturday, the 16th of November, 2024. I'm Peter Boyles. What a great morning it's been. Thank you, Adam Walker. 710 KNUS. We are Denver's talk station. 52 the high today, and on Sunday 50, and on Monday it is 55 degrees. Before we go into the guts of the show, we can tell it's holiday season. And of course, Thanksgiving is coming up, and that marks the date for Children's Hospital Colorado Toy Run. Joining us, and he is a dear friend. We've become friends. His name is Robbie Farrow, and he is at Mile High Harley Davidson in Parker, Colorado. And for the 39th time, bikers do it. Hey, Robbie, I know it's a busy morning for you out there, but thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely, Peter. Always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
I know some of the guys that started this. I mean, it's unbelievable. I think it was 8 or 9 guys, Vinny Terranova and Thumper and all those old legendary bikers. And they did it 39 years. This will be 39th year, correct?
Yes, this is the 39th annual, and you're absolutely right. It started out with a few guys that just decided to take some toys to Children's Hospital, and it has become one of the biggest toy drives in the Denver metro and Front Range area for 39 years, man. Pretty impressive.
And last year was pretty cold.
It was pretty cold. It was pretty cold. The good news is the extended forecast right now for December 8th, it's looking like it's going to hit a high of about 51, 52 degrees. So we should be pretty good this year.
Well, I've been sort of the media, a little bit of the media part of this for, I'm thinking 25 years I've ridden this. And now the way they put, and I understand especially after the viruses hit, when you see these big gruff bikers carrying toys and coming out with tears in their eyes. I mean, it was like, back then the hospital would allow the riders and passengers to come in. And I really understand it. There's some real bad stuff that can come in. So they just unload your bike now. And then you guys are throwing a party. But I mean, it just does your heart good. And so how can folks, come on, Peter, land the plane. Robbie, remember that, land the plane for God's sake. Tell please how folks get involved.
Absolutely, Peter. And, first of all, let me say, you're humbling yourself because you are more than just a media voice to this event. You have been a critical part. You ride as a delegate every year. And, your contribution to what you give to the Children's Hospital Toy Run does not go unnoticed. So I want to personally thank you for that. And then there's kind of a change. So you were absolutely right that, since COVID, it's kind of been like a ride through, you stop, they unload your toys, and then, you go to Mile High Harley Davidson of Aurora for the after party. However, for this year, we're still not allowed to go into the hospital, but this year they are going to allow riders that choose to park in a specific parking lot and walk their gifts to the front entrance.
Wow.
So that is going to be a lot bigger for this year because we haven't been able to do it for a few years. So, they're still going to have all the kids in the lobby and up against the front windows to watch the procession come through and the people that want to walk their toys up. So that's going to be really good. And to get involved, you can go to the websites or the Facebook pages of any of the Big Iron Motorsports dealerships. That's Mile High Harley Davidson of Aurora, Mile High Harley Davidson of Parker, Grand Prix Motorsports, or Foothills Triumph BMW. And you can register and pick up your wristbands at any of these 4 locations. And we also have the commemorative lapel pins that have become so popular that are available at both of the Harley Davidson dealerships, and they will also be available the morning of the run. Aurora Sports Park That's at 19300 East Colfax Avenue in Aurora. Gates open at 8 a.m. The parade begins at 10 a.m. So you want to get out there, ride in the procession, get your toys over to the hospital. And then once you're done there, make your way over to Mile High Harley Davidson of Aurora. That's right off of Airport Boulevard and I-70 for the after party that goes from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., where we will have food from Pork Hub Barbecue, being sponsored by Law Tigers, Pork Hub. We have a band there. It's always a great party.
Oh, it's great.
I mean, you come every year, and it's really just a great way to get the community together. And like you said, to see these bikers get together and do what we do, it's just, I absolutely love being a part of it every year.
It is just amazing. And it really begins the holiday season. It's December the 8th on a Sunday. And as Rob pointed out, but it's Children's Hospital. Everybody brings the toys, and those toys last about a year. The thing that I found out through another friend of mine is that there is a team. You don't wrap the toys, and then there's a team that comes in and sorts them. And even though there's a little boy, little girl in the hospital, every one of their brothers and sisters gets to pick a toy, and it's absolutely perfect. And for all the nasty things you do, this is a good one. And so
I'm telling you, buddy, and to your point, not only the children that are in the hospital, but their families get to benefit from this too. And I'll tell you, when you are a couple dealing with, your child having medical issues, something as simple as just being able to provide your children toys for the holidays means so much to them.
And it really does. I think it means, and I've said this every year, I feel better about it than when you walk in and you see that, especially back when you could see those little kids with wires in them and everything, and your kids are good, and you go like, I don't have any problems, and
right,
just take it off and do it. I will see you this week, and again, thank you. And this is the 39th annual. It's Sunday, December the 8th. And we'll plug it. I'm working on a bunch next week or the week after that. We'll have Robbie on a lot. We'll plug it, and take care of yourself, brother. Have a really good day, and say hi to Aaron for me, the Double A, okay?
I certainly will, Peter. Always a pleasure to talk to you, man. Look forward to seeing you soon.
You too. Thanks, brother. Robbie Farrow, Children's Hospital. So that's that. Now we go to open lines. 303-696-1971. It is been a remarkable morning. If you missed it, we had Pete Earley on, who really surprised me with the ending of that. But he did this book that's no human contact, and it's so powerful. A week from Wednesday will be the imaginary Thanksgiving Day Parade. I'm going to do a lot of work that week, Billy and I, and then I'll be doing the Saturday show, do a Friday show, do a day before Thanksgiving show. So we'll do the imaginary parade. It is open lines, and first time since so if you've been trying to call the show, this is a perfect time. 303-696-1971. The topics this morning were the Tyson fight last night. And then I've been reading extensively about RFK Jr., I should say. And what do you think of all of this? He was, I keep saying, that because we were talking with Pete Earley about impacts of childhood, but he was, when his uncle was killed, and he was 9 years old when Jack Kennedy was assassinated, and that was in 1963. And he was 14 when his father was assassinated in 1968. He's been through so much, and is he the right guy? Maybe he is. Are we ready to go to work? All right, we're down. We have full lines. This is James. Hey, James, you're on the radio show. Good afternoon.
Peter, that guest you had who went into the prison system, he was truly amazing. It's kind of nice to get back to talking about other things than elections and all this other crap.
I agree.
That's gone over for the last few years. But the funny thing is I got 16 years clean and sober. And the last time when I got clean, I went to the penitentiary and used that to get clean and sober while I was there.
Yeah.
And I'd been to Buena Vista. And,
yeah. What was the beef? What did you do the time for?
so it was second degree burglary. I was a homeless heroin addict, and long story short, my past record dictated that I went to prison no matter what.
Sure.
These days they wouldn't do anything to you, but back then they locked me up, or I got myself locked up. But
that's smart.
You know, talking about all the stories and what goes on in there, it's a way of life that a lot of those people get used to, and they really never feel comfortable out here in the real world.
He makes that point.
Yeah, and it's truly sad. When I went in this last time, I had made up my mind that I was never going to be guilty of a wasted life again. So I got in there and I got with some people that were like me, who were thinking the same way. And we all kind of went through the prison system, and we stuck together. And they're a lot of those guys are out and they're real productive in the world now. But you can change.
Oh, absolutely.
And get out. And if you choose to, it's your choice.
Yeah. I mean, when my time came, and we as you probably, I know people call it the bottom, or people call it the moment of awareness, or it's gotten different jackets and different titles. But as a very wise man said to me, you could have doubled down. That your drug and alcohol consumption, you could have done more drugs and more alcohol, and that would have driven that pain away, and you'll hit that level again. And then, as one of the most important people in my life said to me, and this is true, I mean, why would you lie about this? But I was in his office, and it was following Alan's murder, and I was way out of control. And this incredible man said to me, he said, there's only 3 ways, and then he called me a name, that people like you and I end up. And I'm looking at him, and he said, we end up in an institution, meaning the penitentiary or a hospital. We end up on a morgue slab, or we end up sober in a meeting. And James, I was sure there was a 4th way.
Peter, the funny thing about it is I did that documentary with Stephen Tubbs during the Denver and Decay, and I had quite a few years clean then, but I have a lot of friends now on the other side, police officers, and I see what they go through every single day with the drama that these drug addicts and criminals bring into the world, and it's tough.
Oh, listen, and we're creating more every day. The fentanyl, and that's all real. I mean, I talk to people about how real that is, and first of all, this is a really great call, and I don't know, James. I'm at the point now where Bob Cote always had the answer: work works, staying sober, going to meetings on all the same things that are legitimate with you, with me, with everybody that I know. That I call the other people civilians. But listen, take care of yourself. That was a great call, man. Thank you, brother.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, here we go. Dino in Arkansas, my boy. Good morning, afternoon.
That's what's happening. How are you, Peter?
I'm good.
I was a call last week. Of course, you were swamped on the election. I'll get to that in a second. I watched the fight this morning off the YouTube. I was always rooting for him, like I told you last summer when they announced it before he had a cancellation of an injury, and they delayed it. Yeah, it looked like that guy could have really clocked him pretty bad. If he wanted to.
He didn't do it. He did not.
Yeah,
do it.
it's kind of nice. Yeah, but that's what do you do?
Yeah.
Lose money. I heard. Yeah, what Tyson got 20 million. The other guy got 40 million.
That's
for
right. Yeah.
Why would they come up with so much money for it? It's unbelievable. I mean, one of the advertisers come up with, but well, it was like a P.T. and Barnum was right. That's basically what it amounts to.
Well, but the curtain jerker, as they say, that fight was lousy. The next two fights were monsters. They were great fights. The woman's fight was incredible, and then the Tyson fight, and has 58-year-old legs, man, and he, I think,
he did what he could.
Yeah, no,
he did what he could. He just wanted to say he shot his wad the first 2 rounds. So what do you do?
But I think Jake Paul was, and I wasn't a Jake Paul fan until last night. He laid off him. He really did. I mean, he could have hurt him.
It looked like it was bad blood of those weigh-ins, but that's different. Say, if I rehash a little bit of the election, it looks like they were right. She ended up being worse than Biden. And then some people, when the Democrats are saying that Biden could have hung in there and he would have done better. No, he wouldn't have. Of course not. No. He could not have campaigned. No. At least she could travel. No. She's on it. Good. She had no message. And the sad part with that case is she still has delivered 0 press conferences beforehand, before the election or afterwards. Not even in the thing. No. Who knows why she might have been a little bit hitting the sauce pretty good that night when she couldn't come out like Clinton did.
Well,
she had to wait till the next afternoon.
I just had that conversation that, she is allegedly a drinker. I don't know that. But certainly
unless I tell you.
Yeah, but certainly we know about Hillary Clinton being gassed. She was in the Javits Center, and they sent Podesta out we're fighting on through the night, and she'd already made the phone call to Trump and said, and begrudgingly, I mean, you think some bad blood, woo! But she threw in the towel. Nah, please. Yeah. It was over.
But it goes back to something I talked with you in the summer, and you mentioned it. Whatever, looked like she had the momentum. The media builds her up.
Oh man, well, of course.
But if Trump kept pounding away at the border and the economy, that's what brought him home. He just kept hammering that. They had no answer.
The other side had no answer. I just got finished writing a column about it, and I believe it was a long train coming. I believe that all she was doing was she was the locomotive. She was the engineer in the locomotive. We've had people are so up to their necks with political correctness, renaming mountaintops, tearing down statues, renaming military installations, telling people that a 15-year-old boy can play soccer and knock a 15-year-old girl down on the ground, and that's perfectly
it's acceptable.
And you just go on, and the 2 wars and the inflation, and it has been a long train coming. And what was the great line? You've been a long time coming. You're being a long time gone. And the numbers weren't that significant in terms of Donald Trump, but they were in terms of her.
Well, you mentioned also what you mentioned, labeled it last week. No one's ever really talked about it in this term. It was a fed up election. That's a good term.
They were fed up with them. Yeah, they were done. And but they've been doing this stuff. I mean, when you think about it, there hasn't been a Republican since Donald Trump's first 4, but prior to that, it was W, and there's a great shake, and so it's done. I mean, it's the first 100 days.
The popular. We'll see if he can turn things around. It'll be worth it. If they can do it, though, the Dems, unless they change their policies, they'll have a tough time in the next 4 to 8 years.
I'll tell you who they are. They're the Republican Party in reverse. And if they don't change, I like when you go to Vermont, you see the only socialist there, and he goes, "Hey, we lost our way. We're supposed to be the party of the working man, and we're not. We're the party of woke. We're the party of political correctness. We're the party that changes the names of mountaintops. We're the party that says it's okay for a 15, 16-year-old boy to competitively swim against a 15, 16. No, it's not okay.
Yes.
It's not okay.
Sanders, he nailed it. They'll probably ostracise him. He's in his 80s now. They'll get rid of him.
Yeah, but he's, like he's who he is. It's like.
Well, he has all his faculties. Oh, yeah.
He's got the.
You don't think?
Yeah, go ahead.
Take it easy, Val.
You too. All right. Thank you. We got to take a break here, right? One line's open, 303-696-1971. Good afternoon, everyone. A week from this Wednesday, I'll be doing a lot of fill-in that week with Billy and I think with Adam and I. But it'll be the imaginary think about this one, the imaginary Thanksgiving Day parade. Malcom X's daughters sue the CIA for the murder of their dad. And now we're looking at RFK Jr. and Donald Trump said he's going to put all the paperwork out there and we can see it. 710 KNUS.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Butchery Restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
Marshall Tucker Band, country music with a flute. We spent some time with them, and can't you see what that woman is doing to me? Named after a key company in Texas, the Marshall Tucker Key Company. There ain't nobody named Marshall Tucker in that band. Can't you see? Going to take a freight train. How many times you felt that, man? Woo! They sing your song, they sing your music, and they sing your life, and it's like David Allan Coe, you go with it. It's Saturday afternoon, Peter, 16 November, and got a motorcycle outside. Looks like maybe tomorrow might be motorcycle day. 52 will be the high, 50 on Sunday. And our friends at Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. You can remove forever chemicals, microplastics, hard water. Water Pros Peter Boyles Special. This is the gift that will continue. You get a whole water softener and point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system fully installed. We got it. And you start the process, go to waterpros.net and sign up for your free in-home consultation. And they come to your home, they test your water, and they answer all your questions and your concerns about the water. I trust these guys with my water. They are special. The Water Pros, first, just let them come and they'll show you. Look at this stuff, or maybe everything's good. So 303-862-5554, 303-862-5554. The best water treatment for less than the other guys, family-owned, veteran-owned, 303-862-5554. Just get the test, the Peter Boyles Special today. All right, so I think it's line 3. Jacqueline, you're on the radio. Good afternoon.
Well, Uncle Pete, how are you doing? I'm calling from Nebraska.
There you are.
You love me and you know it.
Yeah, I do love you. I do love you.
I'm here to keep you honest. I lived down in Fowler, Colorado, down by Florence, and I remember when they built Supermax. And, most of that place was completely underground. They never see the light of day.
That's right. No, that's absolutely right. Yes.
But do you know that in that area, southeastern Colorado, there are 14 women's prisons?
Oh, there's a ton of prisons down there. Ton of prisons.
They're all over the place, and they farm it out. They sell the land. They do whatever they want. But women's prisons are absolutely outrageous now, and a lot of the stuff, women are doing it. My God, I don't know what to say.
Well, in that area down there, there's the territorial that everybody calls Canyon City, but it's territorial. And then there's the CSP, Colorado State Penitentiary, and that's the one you have to work your way into. And then further out is Florence, of course. But I've been in CSP and I've been in territorial. There's no way that, number one, you're not allowed in. So, and I always said, I have people that have said to me, if you meet somebody that isn't in law enforcement who says that they've been in Florence, they're not telling you the truth. You can't get in.
That's right, Pete, because everybody down there works for either a state or government penitentiary or facility. They do. And there's places all over eastern Colorado, out along the Kansas border, that there is no, they're shut down. They're holding places. I don't know what they're holding them for, but it's all over the place.
I like I said, my experience, we covered the execution of Gary Davis. So I was in CSP, and then I had, not only because I was with the warden and I was with the corrections officers, but we spent 2 days in territorial, which was if you get in, you look at the yard and everything, it was a rock quarry. It was a stone quarry. And they're scary places. Don't let anybody kid you.
Pete, they are. Canyon City is still functional. That's one of the oldest prisons in this park.
Yes, it is.
It's gothic when you go in there.
Oh man, I've been in it, and We did a radio
Stop
show for 3 days in there, and I mean, it's like tell people you do not want to go to prison.
No, not the Canyon City. It's a state penitentiary.
Yeah, state. Easy.
And they put the bad guys in there,
Yep.
and it's not a good deal. But all this stuff, and talking about all this stuff, our prisons here in the United States, Peter, are like Club Med to other countries, to Bolivia, Venezuela. They love to be here.
Oh, there are places in Central America. If you go to prison, your family is responsible for feeding you. It's like,
oh yes,
it's for real. Honduras, like if you do 5 years or whatever it is in Honduras, your family has to be there to feed you. I mean, whatever the way the system is crooked. And Jacqueline, thanks. You be safe. Take care of yourself. Hi, hey Jay. Good afternoon. You're on the show.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm really pretty good. My bike's outside. It's warming up.
Oh, we were just talking about motorcycles over breakfast.
What were you talking about?
And, well, there's knucklehead Harleys and
Sure.
there's knucklehead Harley riders.
Yes.
You know that.
I've heard about
Okay,
many
thank you.
times. Yes.
Okay. We're talking about speed and actually related to Sir Peter Brock, who
Of course.
radio
Of course.
show.
Of course. Yeah, sure.
Today is his birthday.
How old's Peter Brock?
November. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. 38. Let's calculate.
Didn't he restart the cannonball?
Yeah. He did so many things.
I know,
He's
but
just
I mean,
unbelievable.
the original Cannonball was it Cannonball Roberts? Is that who the guy's name was?
I believe so.
And then they they said no more Cannonball, and then he started the Cannonball. And I actually know a very significant person who built a Cannonball car, and no, for real, they took out the back seat, they put a gas tank in it. I mean, if I said his name, you would know it. And they ran the Cannonball. The Cannonball Roberts, Coast to Coast. It has a really lengthy title to the Cannonball. But
1936.
Was that the year?
He's born 1936. So
Okay.
He's on drive it.
Oh, because the real Cannonball Robert. When did the real Cannonball Roberts run? He ran in the teens, I think.
That's right.
Wow. Anyhow, you called for a reason.
Well, I did. No, I tried to talk to you about good stuff because you're talking about prison and all that, and that's tough. But the other thing, too, is today's the day where we, and you helped us launch, and everybody got together at the Alamo Draft House.
Oh,
We
yeah.
brought Wounded Warriors and filled the place with Wounded Warriors and had a car event, raised a ton of money for our wonderful Wounded Warriors at Alamo. Listen to this. That was 1999. It was 5 years ago. Can you believe it? Unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah. So all the nice donors brought their wonderful cars. We had real race cars on the veranda. I've sent you pictures. South American champion Shelby's and a Ferrari copy of a P330 that raced. And we watched the movie, raised a bunch of money for Warriors that came in for free. We had the best time, November 15th of 99, which is crazy. I can't believe it's 5 years.
That's one of the things you hope that these people will do. Stop these wars. Just stop them. It's just insanity. Let me bounce one off you. This is Malcom X's daughters are suing the CIA, the FBI, and the NYPD. And then one of the things that's been promised now from Trump and RFK Jr., we're going to show you the paperwork. Do you think there's any connections? You think there's any connections?
No question.
Yeah, that's how I feel the same way.
No. Now, what I know from the last 6 years, when I believed in three-letter acronym for organizations, many of which I've worked with in the past, and I love law enforcement, and I know people from the FBI. I have family that served with them. Now I'm kind of afraid of them, and I don't like that. I don't want to be afraid of my government.
Well, your government is probably afraid of you.
I hope so. They better be, because there's 350 million people. You remember, we all know the Japanese tried to land in California in Santa Barbara, and the guys got out of the sub, and they blew it back, and they told the sub captain, "These people are shooting at us with rifles."
Yeah, they shelled it, and it was Yamamoto that said, "And there's everybody's got a gun." And the Japanese, of course, that's. Look, listen.
Yeah.
We got to go ride. Thanks, man. Be safe.
I will.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye. Lines are open. First time, 303-696-1971 if you're trying to get in. Hey, Don, good afternoon, man. You're on the show.
Hey, good afternoon, Uncle Pete. What's going on?
This is it. Waiting to go ride.
Oh, well, that's good. I wanted to comment a little bit on President-elect Donald Trump. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. I voted for him because the alternative was just bad. But anyway, I really like him putting RFK Jr. in charge of Health and Human Services.
What do you think?
I think it's a good idea. He's one of 3 people I've ever heard actually point out that there's a mental health crisis in this country. One was him. The other was Tom Martino, and the other guy was he has a YouTube channel called What If Alter.
Huh.
And he's been talking about that for like 2 years.
Well, this RFK Jr. is an interesting read. I've spent a couple of days reading his life, and it wasn't always fun. And he's been, and to his, I don't know if I say to his credit, but he was a heroin addict, and he got sober, but he's got all kinds of the stuff in his ex-wives and just crazy stuff. But is that the guy you need to go in and upset the apple cart? That's my question.
Yeah, I think so. You really do need somebody these people are scared to death of. And there was during the first debate between Trump and Biden, there was something else called the realdebate.com.
Yep.
And it was him. They would ask the questions. Trump and Biden would give the answers, then he would give his answers.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Well,
and
there are so many different things at risk here. And one of them, and I've been doing some, I don't know if it's conspiratorial as more as it is corporate. We were talking about this earlier, when the Surgeon General, I think it was in 63 or 62 or 63, came out and said, look, cigarettes are going to kill you. And at that point, Philip Morris and Liggett Myers and all these big tobacco companies started buying food corporations. And according to this book, or to this series of articles, that we now know about tobacco is they put certain brands of cigarettes would put certain chemicals in that addicted you to their brand. In the end of my smoking, and I started smoking menthol cigarettes, but I smoked Cools and Salem's, Newports, all that stuff. And Berg was smoking Pall Malls, and my dad smoked Lucky Strikes. My Uncle Gene smoked Camels. But they would only, I never bought, how do I say this? I never saw my dad buy anything but Lucky Strikes. I don't know if you ever were a smoker.
No, I never. The first and only time I did marijuana, Nixon was in office.
There you go.
And I've never saw. I stopped drinking because I even stopped drinking socially because I just never saw the attraction. It was the same. Yeah. It's the same with smoking. I'm just one of these oddballs. But making stuff taste good. They do the same thing with.
Oh no, they make there was one brand of cigarettes I forget put chocolate in it, and one menthol menthol cigarettes were heavily addictive, and they knew that, and so I would never go and buy anything other than menthol cigarettes. I never thought, oh, maybe I'll switch over to L&M's. No, you're addicted to that brand. It's like it was built in. So part of these suppositions are that these big tobacco companies did the same thing with food. They made.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. No,
absolutely. Just read the label.
yeah. And no, but
I would tell people also this. If you want a real thrill up your leg, if you next time you're in the supermarket and you find some of this fake meat they got, read the labels on those.
Oh, I know. But the point of it is that they did it with intent. Now, RFK has talked about it, and now he's this anti-vax guy and conspiracy theorist, but just maybe. And like I said, there's an outside shot here that he's the right guy. Now, if that first 100 days, we've been talking about it, Trump has 100 days ahead of him. He won't get it because the old tradition was to give the guy the 100 days. But if this guy goes out and if they end the wars and if they drill and they bring in oil and they drop inflation and boom, 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 he's golden. If he isn't, he's in big, big trouble because he's got guys like Musk and he's got guys like Kennedy. And to me, it's like I sit back and go, well, it's about time. Let's see what happens. And now
it's the same with Malcom X's daughters. I heard about that. And I'm looking at the radio thinking, what took you so long?
Thank you. I'm on a break. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Folks, hang on. We have one line open, 303-696-1971, Saturday afternoon, 710 KNUS.
RockyMountainBargains.com, where you'll always pay half price. Why pay retail when you can get what you want at 50% off? Just go to RockyMountainBargains.com and save. Here's this week's featured item.
$50 gift cards from the Potpourri restaurant in Arvada. Get them now for half price.
Get it now at RockyMountainBargains.com for 50% off. RockyMountainBargains.com, where you always pay half price. Restrictions apply. Go to RockyMountainBargains.com for complete details.
Afternoon, everybody. 710 KNUS. Here we go. We go to Ken. Ken, you waited. Thanks, and good afternoon.
Listen, I might sound a little nervous on you. I've never done this before, but this is important, so I really wanted to talk to you about it.
Okay.
The subject is the underlying topic of just about any topic you want to talk about, that being spiritual warfare.
All right.
And I want to, because you are the avid reader in our in our wonderful state, I want to encourage you to read The Dragon's Prophecy.
All right.
By Rabbi Jonathan Cahn.
All right.
Okay, Jonathan
All right.
Kahn. Jonathan Cahn. He started writing this book the morning after he preached a sermon. Apparently, he's got like a mega church someplace.
Well, the term rabbi and mega church generally don't go together.
Well, I'm pretty sure he's a Messianic Jew. Okay.
All right.
So it wouldn't be offensive to him to say church.
All right.
You know. As a matter of fact, I reached out to him, and they were gracious enough to reply to my inquiry. I inquired as to whether or not he was consulting with or advising Mr. Netanyahu. And
I gotta tell you, we got 3 minutes left in the show. I apologize. So, as we say,
Okay.
cut to the chase.
Cut to the chase. There's three guys that are really, really key players, chosen players in this war. Okay, that's Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Trump, and Mr. Huckabee.
Mike Huckabee.
And Mike Huckabee. He's now the ambassador to Israel.
Yes.
Okay. Jonathan Cahn started writing this book July the 7th, 2023, after preaching a sermon on it the previous night. I'm telling you, Peter, it's going to blow your mind. You'll love it.
Tell me the gist of the book. So, what is his his conclusion
Okay.
is? All right, go ahead, please.
The conclusion is in the book of Revelations, okay? But what he does is he ties together everything that is happening now worldwide. All right down to anti-Semitism poking its ugly head up into just every nation in the world practically. That's very prophetic. But Jonathan Cahn ties it all together so beautifully.
Is it the end times, Ken? Is it coming?
Well, yeah, that's not a mystery.
Well, no, it's been prophesized for, depending upon who you are, for 1,000 years.
Exactly.
We got a minute.
Of the things.
What would you?
All right.
Oh, you got a minute. What would you? And then call me next week. What would you like to leave the audience with? We have 60 seconds.
I recommend so strongly anybody that believes in God that they get and read this book, so they will understand more fully what's really going on in our world. It's spiritual warfare. It's nothing new, but it's very, very shallowly understood. And this really helps to understand what's going on in the world and why.
I have 30 seconds. Please call next week. We'll have a lengthy conversation. Okay. I promise, but I'm jammed up now. Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend. That is it. Adam, thank you, but special thanks to Pete Earley and everybody that listened, and thanks for the great text messaging. I'll see you next week. Thank you.